Hey there, tonight we're uncovering why it truly sucked to be a medieval mill worker. Prepare to meet the gritty side of the Middle Ages, where flour dust wasn't the only thing clogging up your day. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. The clatter of the millstones is your daily soundtrack, a relentless, rhythmic crunch that could drive a monk to break his vow of silence. Welcome to your life as a medieval mill worker. It's not glamorous, but hey, neither is farming or being a knight's squire, unless you're into cleaning armor and fetching the Lord's favorite pair of tights. At least in the mill, you get to be part of the backbone of the medieval economy, which sounds a lot more impressive than it feels. So, what's your day like? Well, forget about sleeping in. That's a luxury reserved for the nobility and maybe their dogs. You start before dawn because the grain won't grind itself, and the miller is not about to let you forget it. We're talking 12 to 14-hour days here, and that's if you're lucky. The mill never sleeps, and neither do you, it seems. Your work involves a lot of heavy lifting, which is great if you're looking to build muscle without a gym membership. Those sacks of grain don't weigh themselves, and each can tip the scales at around 60 kilos, or 132 pounds if you're keeping track. You're also constantly on your feet, adjusting the grain flow, keeping the machinery running smoothly, and ensuring that you don't lose a finger in the process. Occupational hazards, am I right? Now, let's talk money, or the lack thereof. You earn just enough to keep your stomach from growling louder than the millstones. Wages are meager, to say the least. You might bring home about a penny a day, which isn't going to buy you a castle or even a decent pair of shoes. But it's enough to keep you in gruel and occasionally indulge in a slice of bread. Ah, the high life. The economic importance of mills in the medieval period can't be overstated. They were the powerhouses of their day, literally and figuratively. Before the Industrial Revolution introduced us to steam engines and factory machines, water and wind were the medieval workhorses. Mills ground grain to feed the population, and without them, we'd all be stuck gnawing on raw wheat. The Domesday Book of 1086, England's great medieval survey, recorded around 6,000 mills, a testament to their significance. Water mills and windmills are your bread and butter. Let's break down the basics. Water mills harness the power of river currents to turn a water wheel, which then grinds the grain. Simple, right? Except when the river floods or freezes, and then you're just standing around hoping for divine intervention. Windmills, on the other hand, rely on, you guessed it, wind. They need just the right breeze to keep those sails turning. Too little, and nothing happens. Too much, and you're picking splinters out of your tunic. The mechanics are straightforward, but ingenious. A series of gears and shafts transform the natural power of water or wind into rotational motion, which spins the millstone. That stone grinds the grain into flour, which you hope isn't too gritty because that's a fast way to lose customers and teeth. Each mill has its quirks, and knowing them is part of your job. It's not just physical labor. There's a bit of finesse involved, too. Not that anyone's writing ballads about your prowess with a sack of grain. The social dynamics of the mill are an entire saga in themselves. The miller is king here, a big fish in a small pond. He's the one pocketing most of the profits, while you're sweating it out in the dust. Mills were often owned by lords or the church, which means they rake in a cut of the profits as well. You're just trying to avoid becoming part of the machinery, quite literally. Let's dispel a few myths while we're at it. There's this romantic notion that medieval life was simple and bucolic, with everyone living in harmony with nature. Well, if harmony means back-breaking labor and the ever-present risk of starvation, then sure. The mill worker's life is anything but idyllic. It's hard, it's dirty, and it's relentless. Modern conveniences like weekends and labor laws are a distant dream. And yet, despite the grind, pun fully intended, there's a certain camaraderie in the mill. Everyone's in the same boat, so you learn to look out for each other. You swap stories, share complaints, and maybe even sneak in a bit of humor to lighten the load. It's a tough life, but it's yours, and there's a certain pride in that. So next time you're enjoying a slice of bread or a pastry, spare a thought for the medieval mill worker. Because without them, breakfast might look a whole lot different. And remember, while the mill wheel turns and turns, so does the world, and who knows what tomorrow might bring? Probably more grain. Despite the mill wheel spinning on, the life of a mill worker was anything but a fairy tale. Let's take a step back and see where you fit into the medieval social hierarchy. Hint, it's not the top. In the grand feudal system, you're somewhere between the lords and the peasants, like the meat in a very unappetizing sandwich. But it's not quite that simple, because while you're technically a step above the average peasant, what with your specialized skill set and all, you're still very much under the thumb of those who own the land and the mill. Feudalism. It's like a pyramid scheme, but with more dirt and less chance of a Caribbean cruise. At the peak, you've got the king, who owns all the land, theoretically speaking. Below him are the lords, who manage large estates and lord it over everyone else. They lease land to knights and other vassals, who in turn grant portions of it to peasants for farming. Mill workers like you are sort of the odd ones out, not exactly landowners, but not stuck tilling the soil either. Instead, you're tethered to the mill and its owner, a cog in the machinery of medieval economics, if you will. Let's talk about those legal restrictions, shall we? As a mill worker, you're bound by a web of rules and obligations that could make a modern lawyer weep. You might not be a serf, technically, but you can almost smell the serfdom from here. The lord who owns the mill also owns your labor, meaning you can't just up and decide to work somewhere else without permission. And when it comes to wages, let's just say you're not in a strong bargaining position. You're paid what the miller deems fair, which is like asking a fox to set the rules for the henhouse. Speaking of millers, they were often viewed with suspicion by their communities. Imagine a medieval detective novel. The case of the missing flour. Millers were accused of all sorts of nefarious deeds, from shortchanging the weights to skimming off the top. They were the used car salesmen of their day, except instead of a lemon, they sold you a loaf missing a few ounces. In 13th century England, records show disputes over miller misconduct were so common they could have their own court docket. Heaven forbid you ever ask a miller to run a charity bake sale. Not only did millers and their workers face social disdain, but mills themselves were often flashpoints for conflict between lords and peasants. Picture this. The lord decides to raise the fees for grinding grain, citing the need to fund his next falconry expedition or jousting tournament. The peasants, already stretched thin, aren't exactly thrilled by this turn of events. Protests might ensue, and let's just say medieval protests weren't exactly peaceful sit-ins. The mill becomes more than just a building. It's a symbol of oppression, a visible reminder of the economic imbalance. Primary sources from the period echo this sentiment. Take the records of the assize of bread and ale from 13th century England, which regulated the price and quality of bread and ale, essential staples of medieval life. It's a bit like having the government set the price of your morning latte, but with more dire consequences for non-compliance. The mill's role in this equation was crucial, as the quality of the flour directly impacted the bread. If the miller skimped on quality, the entire village would feel it, literally in their daily bread. Despite the suspicion and disdain, being a mill worker wasn't all doom and gloom. There was a certain prestige to being involved in such a vital process. You weren't just some anonymous laborer. You were part of the chain that kept the village fed. Sure, it was a chain with some rusty links and questionable motives, but it was a chain nonetheless. And while you might not have had the freedom to change jobs on a whim, you did have a degree of job security. So long as the mill was in operation, you were needed. Still, the social dynamics were as complex as a medieval tapestry. On one hand, you had the lords and mill owners who reaped the benefits of your labor. On the other, you had the peasants who relied on your work, but viewed you with the same suspicion typically reserved for tax collectors and traveling salesmen. You're in the middle, trying to keep everything running smoothly while dodging accusations of theft or sabotage. It's like walking a tightrope, except the safety net is made of hay and dreams. So there you are, in the thick of it all. As the mill wheel turns, so do the wheels of medieval society, grinding onward in their relentless quest for survival. You've got a role to play, even if it feels like you're just a small part in a grand machine. And while the romance of the mill might be largely fictional, the reality is no less compelling. It's a world of complex relationships and high-stakes economics, where a single sack of grain can be the difference between feast and famine. As you continue to navigate this intricate web of feudal obligations and social intricacies, remember that history is rarely as simple as it seems. Behind every myth lies a grain of truth, and behind every truth, a story worth telling. And who knows? Tomorrow might bring a fresh batch of grain and a new set of challenges, all ready to be ground down by the relentless millstones of time. But before you get too cozy with that sack of grain, let's dive into the whirlwind of technological advancements that turned your world upside down, kind of like how a new smartphone app can upend a modern office. The medieval mill wasn't immune to innovation, and while you might expect this to be a good thing, the reality was a bit more complicated. Enter the camshaft, an engineering marvel that changed the game, but not always for the better. First, let's get mechanical. The camshaft is essentially a rotating cylinder with protrusions, cams, that convert rotational motion into linear motion. Think of it as the medieval answer to the Swiss Army knife, except it was more about grinding grain than opening bottles. This nifty device allowed mills to automate processes that previously required manual labor, like pounding, sawing, and even fulling cloth. Sounds like a dream come true, right? Less manual labor, more efficiency. A win-win. But hold your horses, or your water wheel in this case. For the mill worker, the camshaft was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it meant fewer hours spent performing the most back-breaking tasks. On the other hand, it often led to more work overall. Picture this. The mill owner, now able to process more grain thanks to the camshaft, demands increased output. The expectation isn't fewer hours, but the same grueling schedule with even higher productivity. It's like being told you can now type faster, but still need to work overtime. Progress, indeed. And here's where we debunk a persistent myth. The idea that technological advancements always translate to better working conditions. In the medieval mill, these so-called innovations often meant more work for the same meager wages. While the miller and the lord counted their extra profits, you were left with the same penny a day, now with the added stress of ensuring the new machinery didn't grind to a halt. Ironically, the more advanced the technology, the more attention it required, a bit like juggling flaming swords instead of just balls. The economic implications were significant. With increased production, mills became even more central to the local economy. They were no longer just the place where grain was ground. They became hubs of technological experimentation. This wasn't just a medieval quirk. It was part of a broader trend where technological progress was tightly intertwined with economic power. So while you were sweating it out, the mill owner was busy leveraging these advancements to gain more influence and inevitably more control. The social dynamics shifted too. The introduction of the camshaft and other innovations brought about a division within the workforce. Skilled workers who could maintain and troubleshoot this new machinery found themselves in higher demand, creating a sort of medieval tech elite. Meanwhile, unskilled laborers found their roles diminishing, their labor increasingly undervalued. It's the medieval version of being replaced by a more efficient algorithm, except the algorithm is a wooden cylinder with some strategically placed bumps. Yet, despite the hardships, there was a certain fascination with these technological marvels. Medieval people were just as intrigued by new inventions as we are today. The camshaft and its ilk were seen as cutting-edge technology, the medieval equivalent of owning the latest gadget. People came from neighboring villages to see these innovations in action, marveling at the ingenuity of it all. It's a bit like how we might crowd around the latest smartphone, except this gadget was all about crushing grain rather than crushing candy. The myth of the mill worker living a simple, bucolic life in harmony with nature was just that, a myth. In reality, you were part of a rapidly changing world, one where technology promised much but delivered only to those at the top of the social ladder. The promise of progress was real, but so was the reality of exploitation. Technological advancements didn't necessarily mean less work or higher pay. Often, they simply raised the expectations placed upon you, leaving you to pick up the pieces, or in this case, the grain. It's easy to romanticize the past, to imagine a time when life was simpler and technology less intrusive. But the truth is, the medieval mill worker faced a world just as complex and challenging as ours, full of both opportunity and inequality. While the mill wheel turned and the camshaft cranked, you were caught in the gears of progress, pushing ever forward, but always at the mercy of those who owned the machinery. As we wrap up this chapter, remember that the mill story is far from over. Technological advancements continued to shape the medieval world, setting the stage for further changes that would eventually lead to the Industrial Revolution. But for now, as you stand in the shadow of the mill, the hum of the camshaft in your ears, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring. More grain, more work, and maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of hope for a better day. But before you get too caught up in the dream of a better day, let's talk about the harshest reality of all, the health hazards that came with the territory of being a medieval mill worker. If you thought the long hours and meager wages were bad, just wait until you hear about the occupational hazards. Not exactly the stuff of nostalgic daydreams, right? First things first, let's address the elephant, or should I say, the dust cloud in the room. Working in a mill meant you were constantly surrounded by airborne flour dust. Now you might think, flour dust, how bad can that be? But this isn't your grandma's kitchen we're talking about. This was a veritable blizzard of particles that could turn your lungs into something resembling a medieval bread pudding. In modern terms, it's similar to working in a coal mine without a mask. Definitely not ideal for your long-term health. Historical records from the 13th century, like those found in the city of Paris, document cases of miller's lung, a respiratory condition caused by prolonged exposure to flour dust. Imagine coughing up what feels like a loaf of bread every morning. Not quite the hearty breakfast you had in mind. It gets worse, and you remember that understanding of respiratory health back then was about as advanced as a millstone. No inhalers, no ventilators, just a lot of wheezing and hoping your lungs didn't call it quits. Now, let's talk accidents. Working with heavy machinery in a time when safety regulations weren't even a twinkle in a bureaucrat's eye was a recipe for disaster. The millstones, weighing in at over a ton, could turn a careless moment into a tragic mishap. Fingers, hands, entire limbs, none were safe from the ravenous appetite of these grinding giants. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of working in a factory full of hungry lions. And then there's the ever-present risk of fire. Flour dust, believe it or not, is highly combustible. Add a stray spark, and you've got yourself a medieval fireworks display, minus the cheers, and with a lot more screaming. The historical record is littered with mentions of mills going up in flames, taking with them not just the workers' livelihoods, but sometimes their lives. In 13th century England, fire-related incidents weren't just common. They were practically expected, like an annual event no one wanted to attend, but everyone was forced to. Of course, if you survived the day's work relatively unscathed, you still had the joys of medieval medicine to contend with. The local doctor was likely just as skilled with a sore as he was with a poultice, which is to say, not very. If you were injured, you might find yourself at the mercy of barber surgeons, who were basically the Swiss Army knives of medieval healthcare. They cut hair, pulled teeth, and performed amputations all in one terrifying package. Anesthesia, PFFD, who needs it when you've got a stiff drink and a friend to hold you down? With such grim prospects, you might wonder why anyone would choose this line of work. But here's the kicker. Many didn't have a choice. Economic necessity often dictated career paths more than personal preference. You needed to eat, and the mill needed workers. It was a match made in economic purgatory. And while we're debunking myths, let's tackle the idea that medieval people simply accepted their lot with a stoic shrug. Historical accounts reveal that workers often protested poor conditions, even if it meant facing the wrath of their superiors. It's a classic case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate just how little medical care was available to these hard-working folks. The concept of universal health care was as alien as flying cars, and most treatments were about as effective as a leech in a drought. You could try praying for a miracle, but as many found out, divine intervention wasn't a reliable healthcare plan. The Black Death of the 14th century only compounded these issues, sweeping through Europe like a grim reaper on a time crunch, and mills were no exception to its reach. This brings us to the economic context. The health of mill workers was directly tied to the productivity of the mills, which in turn fed the local economy. A sick or injured worker meant less grain processed, less flour produced, and ultimately less bread on the table. This wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a community crisis. It's a stark reminder that the well-being of workers is inextricably linked to the prosperity of society. So next time you're enjoying a slice of artisanal bread, spare a thought for those who risked life and limb to make it possible. The brutal realities faced by medieval mill workers are a testament to the resilience and grit of people living in those times. They were caught in a complex web of economic necessity, technological change, and social expectation, all while battling the very real threats to their health and safety. It makes you wonder how they managed to keep going day after day, but perhaps it's simply the age-old story of human endurance in the face of adversity. As we leave behind the dust and danger for a moment, remember that the story of the mill worker is far from over. There's more to explore, more myths to debunk, and more truths to uncover. As the mill wheel turns, so does the narrative, grinding onward through the ages, carrying with it the tales of those who labored in its shadow. Who knows what challenges and changes tomorrow might bring? But for now, let's pause and appreciate the strength it took to keep that wheel turning, dust clouds and all. As the dust settles and the echoes of the grinding millstones fade, we're left with a question. What's the legacy of these medieval mill workers, the unsung heroes of the breadbasket? Well, let's dig in, because their story is as rich and layered as a good loaf of sourdough. If you're expecting a tale of knights and castles, think again. This is a saga of grit and grain. First, let's talk about their economic footprint. Medieval mills were the economic engines of their day, far more than just places where grain went to meet its pulverizing fate. They were vital cogs in the medieval economy, driving commerce and feeding populations. You see, without the consistent grind of the millstone, society would have been stuck in the proverbial dark ages of raw wheat. The Domesday Book of 1086 didn't just list mills for fun. It was a testament to their central role in economic life, with around 6,000 mills recorded in England alone, each one a minifactory of medieval innovation. Now, onto myth-busting, because who doesn't love a little reality check? There's a tendency to romanticize medieval labor as a simpler, nobler time when everyone lived in pastoral harmony. Spoiler alert, not quite. The life of a mill worker was anything but idyllic. It was a grind, literally and figuratively. Long hours, low pay, and a work environment that could charitably be described as challenging were par for the course. Forget the image of the rustic miller merrily whistling while he works. This was more like the medieval version of working in a sweatshop, minus the occasional fire safety drill. But let's not overlook their contribution to the evolution of labor rights. You see, the struggles faced by mill workers were not in vain. They were part of a long, slow march toward better working conditions, a journey that wouldn't pick up real momentum until centuries later, but a journey nonetheless. The grievances of medieval workers, though often ignored or brutally suppressed, laid the groundwork for future demands for fair treatment and better wages. Every protest, every whispered complaint in the dust-laden air was a step toward the labor rights movements that would eventually sweep through history. And let's not forget the technological legacy. The innovations of the medieval mill, from camshafts to water wheels, were stepping stones to the Industrial Revolution. They were the precursors to the mechanization that would eventually reshape the world. It's like the medieval version of beta testing. The kinks and quirks of these early machines paved the way for future advancements. So, the next time you marvel at modern machinery, spare a thought for the humble mill and its laborers, who toiled so that engines could one day roar. Now, what about the bigger picture? The societal dynamics the mill workers navigated were a direct reflection of the broader feudal system, a system that, much like a particularly bad rash, was hard to shake off. The rigid social hierarchy kept workers tethered to their roles, but it also fostered a sense of community and shared hardship. There was a camaraderie born out of necessity, a collective endurance that's easy to romanticize, but was often just survival in disguise. In examining the harsh realities of medieval millwork, we gain insight into the broader human condition. The drive to persevere in the face of adversity, the struggle for dignity and fairness, and the quest for progress, despite the odds. These themes are as relevant today as they were in the Middle Ages. The story of the mill workers isn't just a historical footnote. It's a mirror reflecting our ongoing journey toward justice and equality in the workplace. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour through the life of a medieval mill worker, remember that history isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a tapestry woven from countless individual stories of grit and determination. The mill workers, with their dust-choked lungs and calloused hands, played a crucial role in shaping the economic and social landscapes of their time. Their legacy lives on, not just in the loaves of bread we break today, but in the enduring fight for better labor conditions worldwide. So next time you find yourself complaining about the Wi-Fi at work, think of the medieval mill worker grinding away in the shadow of the mill. Their story is a reminder that progress is a slow grind, much like life itself, an endless turning of the millstone, each rotation bringing us closer to a brighter tomorrow. And who knows, maybe the wheels of progress will turn just a little smoother, thanks to the dusty laborers who came before us. In the heart of the 18th century, where powdered wigs and political intrigue were all the rage, a young girl named Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna, yes, that's quite the mouthful, was born into the Austrian Habsburg dynasty. Now, if you're thinking of the Habsburgs as the Kardashians of Europe, eternally involved in drama, but with a lot more inbreeding, you're not far off. Marie Antoinette, as she came to be known, was the 15th child of Empress Maria Theresa and Emperor Francis I. Talk about having a crowd at the dinner table. Raised in the Baroque splendor of Vienna's Hofburg Palace, Marie Antoinette's early years weren't exactly a grueling academic boot camp. Her formal education was, shall we say, less than rigorous. While her brothers were drilled in statecraft and Latin, she learned French, music, and a smattering of history. Imagine a curriculum where charm and the harpsichord were core subjects, with a minor in dancing. Her mother, Maria Theresa, had grand plans for her daughters, marry them off to bolster the empire's influence. Marie was a pawn in the grand game of dynastic chess, and boy, did she have a role to play. At the tender age of 14, Marie's life took a dramatic turn. The political winds were blowing her towards France, where a marriage was arranged with Louis Auguste, future Louis Roman XVI, a union designed to solidify a Franco-Austrian alliance. It was less about romance and more about realpolitik. The Habsburgs and the Bourbons were like two heavyweight champs forced into an awkward handshake, each eyeing the other's territories with a mix of suspicion and greed. Before Marie could start her new life as Dauphine, she had to be stripped of her Austrianness, quite literally at a symbolic ceremony on an island in the Rhine River. Picture this. She was made to undress entirely, shedding her Austrian clothes and slipping into French attire as if a mere wardrobe change could overwrite her origins. If that doesn't scream 18th century drama, I don't know what does. The French court was essentially saying, "Welcome to France, now forget where you came from." The logistics of moving a teenage bride across Europe in the 1760 were nothing short of epic. Picture a convoy that seemed to stretch to the horizon, with 57 carriages, 117 footmen, and a retinue that could rival a rock star's tour entourage. The journey from Vienna to Versailles covered roughly 800 miles and took over 2 weeks, a marathon of ceremonial stops, lavish receptions, and probably more than a few awkward silences. And let's not forget the cost. This grand procession was a veritable money pit, with expenses soaring to astronomical heights. The wedding itself was a spectacle of opulence, costing an estimated 2 million livres, a sum that could have fed thousands of French peasants. But who needs bread when you have fireworks, right? Marie Antoinette's arrival in France was like a celebrity debut. The French people were initially charmed by the young Dauphine's beauty and grace. Yet, beneath the surface of this fairy tale was a whirlpool of cultural tension. Marie, with her Austrian roots, was a foreigner in a fiercely proud French court. She had to navigate the labyrinthine etiquette of Versailles, where the rules were as intricate as a Rococo tapestry and twice as baffling. In the midst of all this pageantry, Marie's education, or lack thereof, began to show. She struggled with the intricacies of French politics and the court's backstabbing games. Her mother, ever the strategist, bombarded her with letters full of advice and admonitions. Maria Theresa's missives were like a medieval version of helicopter parenting, instructing Marie on everything from political alliances to bedroom politics. One can almost hear the exasperated sighs echoing through the halls of Versailles each time a letter arrived. As Marie Antoinette settled into her new role, the French court was a hotbed of gossip and scandal. She was scrutinized relentlessly, every misstep magnified under the courtly microscope. The young Dauphine quickly became a fashion icon, though her extravagant tastes would later become a stick with which her critics would beat her. At the time, her love for elaborate gowns and towering hairstyles was seen as endearing, her way of charming the French nobility. Little did anyone know, this penchant for opulence would become a symbol of royal excess and fuel the fiery rhetoric of revolutionaries. Marie Antoinette's story is often romanticized, cast in the light of tragic glamour. But beneath the powdered wigs and silken dresses was a young woman thrust into an unforgiving spotlight. Her life was dictated by forces far beyond her control, a reality check that no amount of lace or luxury could cushion. And so, with a mix of naivete and resilience, Marie Antoinette embarked on a path that would lead her into the annals of history, one misstep, scandal, and revolution at a time. For Marie Antoinette, the transition from Austrian Archduchess to French Dauphine was akin to jumping headfirst into a shark tank, only with less water and more wigs. Versailles was a place where the beautiful and the brutal were constantly at play, a court where subtlety was a full-contact sport. The palace itself was an architectural marvel, but its corridors echoed with whispers of intrigue and power plays. Marie had to master the art of Versailles politics, where influence was wielded with a flick of the fan and alliances forged over elaborate dinners. Her Austrian roots weren't the only thing that set her apart. Her youthful exuberance and tendency to disregard the stifling etiquette of the court made her a target for criticism. She was the new kid on the block, and Versailles was the ultimate high school where gossip could dethrone you faster than you could say, "Let them eat cake," which, by the way, she never did. Let's get one thing straight. Marie Antoinette's reputation for frivolous spending wasn't entirely unfounded, but it was definitely exaggerated. Yes, she had a penchant for fashion that would make even the most dedicated shopaholic blush. Her wardrobe expenses reportedly hit around 120,000 livres annually, a sum that could fund a small army, or more practically, feed starving peasants. But hey, when you've got a closet full of silk and satin, who needs practicality? However, it's important to remember that this was a time when opulence wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. In the cutthroat world of Versailles, appearances were everything. The court was a stage, and Marie Antoinette understood that if she wanted to maintain her status, she had to play the part. Her extravagant fashions weren't merely about vanity. They were her armor in the social battlefield of the French court. But let's not paint her as a one-dimensional shopaholic. Beneath the layers of lace and towering coiffures was a woman trying to navigate a political labyrinth. Marie's attempts to secure political influence were often overshadowed by her public persona. She wasn't just a fashion icon. She was a political player trying to assert her position in a court that was more Game of Thrones than Downton Abbey. Amidst the feathers and flattery, there was a storm brewing outside the gilded walls of Versailles. France was in the throes of a financial crisis that made today's economic woes look like a minor hiccup. The country's debt was skyrocketing, thanks in part to their costly support of the American Revolution, a move that was as politically savvy as it was fiscally reckless. The French monarchy was hemorrhaging money, and the people were starting to notice. Marie Antoinette's spending habits became a convenient scapegoat for the kingdom's economic woes. Her critics painted her as the embodiment of royal excess, turning her into the poster child for everything wrong with the monarchy. It was easier to blame the foreign queen with the expensive tastes than to confront the complex web of financial mismanagement that had been brewing long before she donned her first French gown. But Marie wasn't oblivious to the unrest. Despite her reputation, she made several attempts to influence policy, albeit with mixed results. She supported reforms that aimed to modernize the state and reduce the crippling taxes on the peasantry. Unfortunately, her efforts often clashed with the entrenched interests of the French nobility and a king who was, shall we say, less than decisive. The Queen's attempts to wield political power were further hampered by her outsider status. In a court where bloodlines were everything, it was forever the Austrian, a foreigner trying to navigate the treacherous waters of French politics. Her every move was scrutinized, every decision criticized. It was a classic case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Meanwhile, outside the palace, social unrest was reaching a boiling point. The streets of Paris were filled with whispers of revolution, fueled by pamphlets that painted the royals as out-of-touch tyrants. The gap between the haves and the have-nots was widening, and Marie Antoinette found herself at the center of a storm she couldn't control. As the financial crisis deepened, Marie's attempts at political maneuvering became increasingly desperate. She tried to rally support for reform from within the court, but her efforts were often thwarted by the very system she was trying to change. It was like trying to steer a ship through a hurricane with nothing but a silk handkerchief. In the end, Marie Antoinette's story is one of contradictions. She was a queen who embodied both the glamour and the tragedy of her time. Her life was a testament to the harsh realities of power and the fickle nature of public opinion. She was a woman caught between two worlds, trying to make her mark in a society that was as unforgiving as it was opulent. As we continue to peel back the layers of Marie's life, it's clear that beneath the caricature of the frivolous queen was a complex figure navigating a world that was as dangerous as it was dazzling. Her early years at the French court set the stage for a lifetime of challenges, where every decision was a gamble and every move could spell disaster. But that's a story for another day, as the stakes continue to rise and the revolution looms ever closer. As the stakes continued to rise and the revolution loomed ever closer, Marie Antoinette found herself smack dab in the middle of public relations nightmare. It was like a 1780s version of a social media meltdown, minus the hashtags, but with all the venomous pamphlets you could imagine. Armchair revolutionaries of the time, armed with quills and ink rather than keyboards, were churning out pamphlets faster than Marie could change her towering wigs. These pamphlets, or libelles as the French called them, were the 18th century equivalent of tabloid gossip rags. They didn't just hint at scandal, they revelled in it. Marie Antoinette was portrayed as everything from a spendthrift shopaholic to a devious political mastermind. The truth, probably somewhere in between, but who needs facts when you have a good story? These pamphlets were the fuel that kept the fire of public discontent burning, and boy, were they flammable. One of the most infamous slights against Marie Antoinette involves a phrase she never actually said, but which has become synonymous with royal obliviousness. Let them eat cake. The origins of this phrase are murky at best. It supposedly surfaced in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions, where he attributes it to a great princess, but Rousseau never named names, and the timeline doesn't even match up with Marie's life. Yet, this myth stuck to her like powdered sugar on a croissant. Why? Because it fits the narrative. It's a quip that perfectly encapsulates the image of a queen so out of touch with her starving subjects that she might as well have been living on another planet. Now, let's shift our gaze to the economic realities of late 18th century France, a landscape as bleak as a Gothic novel. The French economy was collapsing under the weight of debt, a crisis exacerbated by years of warfare, including that little venture known as the American Revolution. Supporting the rebellious colonies across the Atlantic sounded like a great idea at the time. Stick it to the British and all that. But financing overseas freedom fights doesn't come cheap, and soon the French treasury was emptier than a king's promises. The plight of the peasantry was dire. Imagine working your fingers to the bone and still barely scraping together enough to survive. While Marie was being painted as the villain in pamphlets, the real monster under the bed was the crippling tax system. The French crown taxed everything from salt to windows, squeezing the last drop of revenue from the poorest citizens, while the nobility and clergy enjoyed their tax exemptions. It's no wonder the common folk were ready to storm the Bastille. Marie Antoinette, for her part, wasn't blind to the kingdom's woes. Despite the popular image of her as a frivolous fashionista, she did attempt to influence policy, supporting measures like Turgot's reforms aimed at easing the tax burden on the lower classes. But these efforts were constantly thwarted by entrenched interests, and a king who, let's face it, wasn't exactly the poster child for decisive leadership. As the economic and social pressures mounted, Marie Antoinette became the perfect scapegoat. Her foreignness, her spending, her perceived indifference, it all made for a narrative as compelling as it was misleading. The French populace, struggling to put bread on the table, found it easy to direct their anger at the foreign queen, who seemed to epitomize everything wrong with the monarchy. It was a tale as old as time. When you're looking for someone to blame, the outsider makes an easy target. Meanwhile, in the salons and coffee houses of Paris, revolutionary ideas were brewing. Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot had planted the seeds of rebellion, and now they were taking root. The pamphlets that vilified Marie Antoinette were just one part of a larger tapestry of dissent, a tapestry woven with threads of economic desperation, political ineptitude, and social inequality. The tension between the grandeur of Versailles and the grim reality outside its gates was palpable, while Louis Roman XVI clung to his throne with the tenacity of a man trying to hold onto a bar of soap in the shower. The demands for change grew louder. The Estates General, an assembly of representatives from France's 3 estates, was convened in 1789, for the first time in over a century, an indication that the situation was spiraling out of control faster than you could say ancient regime. Marie Antoinette's life was becoming a high-stakes game of political chess, and she was a queen facing checkmate. As the revolution gathered momentum, her every move was scrutinized, every gesture analyzed. Her attempts to influence policy and mitigate the growing unrest were thwarted at every turn, as if she were trying to patch a sinking ship with a lace handkerchief. The myth of Marie Antoinette as the heartless queen persisted, fueled by the very real grievances of a populace at its breaking point. But beneath the caricature lay the story of a woman caught in the crosshairs of history, trying to navigate a world that was unraveling faster than her elaborate coiffures. Her tale was one of glamour and tragedy, a testament to the power of public perception and the harsh realities of political life. As we leave Marie Antoinette at this juncture, it's clear that her story is far from over. The revolution is on the horizon, a storm that will sweep away the old order and reshape France forever. For now, Marie stands at the precipice, a queen in a gilded cage, waiting for the hammer of history to fall. The next chapter in her saga promises to be as tumultuous as it is transformative, as the echoes of discontent grow louder and the revolution begins to take shape. As the revolution's storm clouds gathered, Marie Antoinette found herself in an increasingly precarious position. France was like a ticking time bomb, and Marie, unfortunately, was sitting right on top of it. The events of 1789 were the spark that finally lit the fuse. The Estates General, that long-forgotten relic of French politics, was convened, and what began as a call for fiscal reform spiraled into outright revolution faster than you could say, "Vive la France." The Bastille fell on July 14, 1789, an event that was less about the actual strategic value of the fortress and more about what it symbolized, the people's power to challenge the monarchy. It was the revolutionary equivalent of a mic drop. Suddenly, the French populace wasn't just whispering about change, they were screaming it from the rooftops. And Marie, she was right in the crosshairs, the epitome of everything the revolution sought to dismantle. In October of the same year, the Women's March on Versailles brought the revolution to the very doorstep of the monarchy. Thousands of women, armed with pikes and an insatiable hunger, not just for bread, but for justice, descended upon the opulent palace. The royal family was forced to relocate to the Tuileries Palace in Paris, a move that was less about strategic retreat and more about being dragged kicking and screaming into the core of revolutionary fervor. From her new, much less glamorous abode, Marie Antoinette watched as the world she knew crumbled around her. The National Assembly was busy drafting the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a document that laid the foundation for modern democracy. Meanwhile, Marie was trying to navigate this new political landscape with all the grace of a ballerina on a tightrope. Her attempts to influence Louis Roman XVI were real, but let's be honest, Louis had the backbone of a dandelion in a hurricane. The idea that Marie was the puppet master pulling the strings of a hapless king is more fiction than fact, a myth that makes for a great story but doesn't hold up under scrutiny. As the revolution gained momentum, Marie's position grew increasingly untenable. The infamous affair of the diamond necklace in 1785 had already sullied her reputation, a scandal that painted her as a greedy queen willing to bankrupt the treasury for a bauble she never actually acquired. It was like a bad episode of Real Housewives, only with more powdered wigs and less bardocks. The revolutionaries, not content with simply clipping the royal family's wings, wanted them grounded for good. In 1791, the royal family's attempt to escape to Austria, a plan that was as ill-conceived as it was desperate, ended in the small town of Varennes. Their capture and forced return to Paris were a national spectacle. It was the reality TV moment of the age, complete with public humiliation and a captive audience. By 1792, France was embroiled in war with Austria and Prussia, a conflict that only served to heighten revolutionary fervor. The monarchy was officially abolished, and Louis Roman XVI was executed on January 21, 1793. Marie Antoinette, once the glittering jewel of Versailles, was now a widow in a world that had no place for queens. Imprisoned in the Temple, a medieval fortress in Paris, Marie's life was stripped of its former splendor. Her cell was a far cry from the opulence of Versailles, more damp dungeon than gilded cage. Her children, once the light of her life, were separated from her, and the revolutionaries did their best to erase any vestige of her former identity. Marie Antoinette became widow capid, a title as bleak as her prospects. Despite the dire circumstances, Marie displayed remarkable resilience. Her stoic demeanor in the face of adversity was a stark contrast to the caricature of the frivolous queen. When she was finally brought to trial in October 1793, her composure was nothing short of regal. The charges against her ranged from the plausible, such as depleting the national treasury, to the absurd, like conspiring with foreign powers to overthrow the revolution. The most scandalous accusation, incest with her own son, a charge so egregious that even her enemies found it hard to swallow. The trial was less about justice and more about spectacle, a kangaroo court designed to seal her fate and satisfy public thirst for retribution. Marie's defense was a masterclass in dignity under duress. When asked about the incest charge, she famously responded, "If I have not replied, it is because nature itself refuses to answer such a charge laid against a mother." Her words were a slap in the face to the revolutionaries, a reminder that beneath the propaganda, she was still a human being. The trial captivated Europe, a courtroom drama that played out on an international stage. While Marie's influence over Louis Roman XVI had always been exaggerated, her trial showed that the myths surrounding her were sometimes more powerful than the woman herself. Her execution on October 16, 1793, was both a personal tragedy and a pivotal moment in the French Revolution. As she was led to the guillotine, her final words to the executioner were a simple apology for accidentally stepping on his foot, a last gesture of politeness in a world that had shown her none. Marie Antoinette's execution was the ultimate fall from grace, the final act in a story that had been as much about perception as reality. The queen who had once dazzled Europe with her beauty and charm was now a cautionary tale about the perils of power and the fickle nature of public opinion. Her life and death were a testament to the complexities of human nature, the tension between myth and reality, and the indiscriminate sweep of history's scythe. But lest we think this is where the story ends, remember that the revolution was far from over. The echoes of Marie's life reverberated through the annals of history, a reminder of the human cost of political upheaval. As France continued its tumultuous transformation, Marie Antoinette's legacy lingered, a queen who became both a symbol and a scapegoat, a figure shrouded in both romance and tragedy. The revolution was still unfolding, and new chapters awaited, as the world watched France grapple with its newfound ideals and the brutal realities of change. Marie Antoinette's execution didn't just close the book on a life of opulence and scandal. It threw down the gauntlet for a new era in France. Her passing marked a turning point in the French Revolution, morphing her into a symbol of the ancient regime's downfall and a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and privilege. As her head fell into the basket, the revolutionaries hoped it would signal the birth of a more egalitarian society. Spoiler alert, replacing one form of chaos with another rarely goes as planned. So, what was the aftermath? Well, Marie's death reverberated far beyond the place de la Révolution. It was as if the guillotine's blade had sliced through the fabric of Europe, sending shockwaves across the continent. The execution of a queen, an act that was unthinkable not long before, underscored just how radical the French Revolution had become. Marie Antoinette, once the dazzling darling of Versailles, was now a martyr for some and a monster for others, depending on which side of the political fence you stood. In the years following her death, France underwent a roller coaster of political upheaval that made the Wild West look like a church picnic. The Reign of Terror, led by Robespierre and his merry band of guillotine enthusiasts, saw thousands more meet a similar fate as Marie. Talk about a revolution eating its own children. The chaos didn't stop there. Napoleon Bonaparte would eventually rise from the revolutionary rubble, crowning himself emperor and declaring, Liberté, égalité, fraternité. How about a little bit of autocracy instead? Yet, despite the tumult, Marie's legacy endured. She became a scapegoat whose story was retold and reshaped to fit the narrative of whoever was telling it. To the revolutionaries, she was the embodiment of royal excess and indifference, a poster child for everything they sought to destroy. To her supporters and those nostalgic for the monarchy, she became a tragic figure, a queen undone by circumstance as much as by her own missteps. Even today, her story captivates us, straddling the line between myth and reality. Marie Antoinette has been immortalized in countless books, films, and even that infamous Sofia Coppola movie with all the pastel macarons. She's become a cultural icon, her image synonymous with decadence and downfall. But why do we remain so fascinated? Well, her life was the ultimate reality show, complete with drama, intrigue, and a tragic ending that would make even Shakespeare nod in approval. Marie Antoinette's tale is a testament to the power of narrative, her mythologized image, a frivolous queen whose extravagant spending and obliviousness led to her demise, has proven as compelling as it is misleading. Sure, she had a penchant for luxury, but so did pretty much every monarch of the time. The difference was that Marie became the face of the monarchy's excess at a time when the common people were starving. Her legacy is a reminder that perception often trumps reality, especially when you're the outsider in a world that loves a scapegoat. If one were to dig through the layers of the Rococo wallpaper and powdered wigs, they'd find a woman who was, in many ways, a product of her time. A pawn in the dynastic chess games of Europe, Marie was thrust into the public eye with little preparation for the political and social maelstrom she would face. She's a reminder that history's villains are often more complex than they appear. Their stories are woven from both the threads of their actions and the biases of those who tell their tales. And let's not forget the economic backdrop of her story. Marie Antoinette lived in an era where the French economy was as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. The financial woes of France weren't solely due to her spending, but rather a complex web of debt, mismanagement, and poor decision-making that had been festering long before she stepped foot in Versailles. Yet, she became the face of fiscal irresponsibility, a convenient narrative that simplified the chaos into a single, blamable figure. So, as we wrap up this journey through Marie Antoinette's life, it's clear that her story is one of contrasts, a blend of glamour and grit, myth and reality. She remains an enigmatic figure, a queen who lived in a gilded cage and died a symbol of revolutionary fervor. Her life and death continue to provoke debate and inspire fascination, a testament to the enduring power of her story. In the end, Marie Antoinette's legacy is a cautionary tale about the dangers of excess, the power of public perception, and the brutal reality of political life. She is a reminder that history is often written by the victors, but it is remembered by those who seek to uncover the truth beneath the legend. Her story is a mirror reflecting the complexities of human nature and the unpredictable forces of change, an echo from the past that resonates with us even today. So, next time you see a cake, think not of Marie's supposed indifference, but of a world in upheaval, where the guillotine sliced more than just heads. It severed the old from the new, leaving a legacy as enduring as it is enigmatic. If you thought mornings in Imperial China meant peaceful hours of Zen-like meditation over cups of aromatic tea, prepare to have your dream bubble popped. The reality, more like dodging a rogue chicken in a bustling market while trying not to lose your sandal in the mud. Welcome to the actual dawn of an average day in Imperial China, an era that stretched from 221 BCE with the Qin dynasty to the final bow of the Qing in 1912. It was a time when the morning air was thick with more than just mist and dreams. It was laden with the smell of sizzling street food and the sounds of merchants shouting prices over the relentless clamor of bargaining. Before you could even think about sipping a delicate brew, you were likely elbow-deep in the cacophony of the morning bazaar. Forget the serene, artistically arranged tea ceremony often plastered on postcards. The average Joe, or let's be real, the average Zhang, was more likely to be found jostling through a crowd in the local market, where the only zen came from successfully haggling down the price of a bowl of rice porridge. Speaking of breakfast, let's chew on the economics a bit. Your morning meal might have been a humble bowl of congee, a rice porridge that was as ubiquitous as it was economical. For just a few copper coins, you could fill your belly with something warm and comforting, often garnished with a sprinkle of pickled vegetables, or if you were feeling fancy, a sliver of salted duck egg. But if you were someone with a bit more silver jingling in your pockets, or perhaps just feeling particularly extravagant, you might splurge on bird's nest soup. Yes, that's right, soup made from the saliva nests of swiftlets. The cost? You were looking at shelling out around 100 taels of silver per caddy, which was more than most people earned in a year. Bird's nest soup was the caviar of its day, hailed for its supposed health benefits, even if those benefits were more anecdotal than scientifically validated. And let's not forget the social dynamics at play here. The marketplace wasn't just about buying and selling. It was the morning social hub, the ancient equivalent of a bustling cafe or a digital chat room where everyone from farmers to scholars exchanged news, gossip, and the occasional insult. In a society where social niceties were as important as the food on your plate, knowing the right people, and more importantly, being seen knowing the right people, could be your ticket up the social ladder. Now, if you think the market was a free-for-all, think again. The government had its fingers in this pie too, regulating everything from weights and measures to prices, always ready to swoop in with mandates. It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it kept the market stable and relatively fair. On the other, it was a constant reminder of the empire's tight grip on daily life. But even in this structured chaos, there was room for the occasional loophole, and savvy merchants knew exactly how to exploit every crack in the system to turn a profit. In the world of Imperial China, mornings were less about leisurely awakenings and more about navigating the socio-economic labyrinth of the marketplace. It was a world where breakfast was not just a meal, but a reflection of your place in the grand social tapestry. So next time you sigh wistfully over those dreamy tea ceremonies, remember the reality. A crowded, noisy, exhilarating market where the day truly began. So, once you've navigated the chaotic ballet of the morning market, it's time to dive into the deep end of the workday in Imperial China. Let's smash one myth right off the bat. Forget any idyllic scenes of scholars lounging under cherry blossom trees, pondering the mysteries of the universe, or composing Hakis. That kind of day was a luxury afforded to very few. For most, the workday was more about back-breaking labor than romantic musings. Picture yourself as a farmer. Sunrise marked the beginning of a grueling routine. Your life revolved around rice paddies and fields, where the only thing deeper than the mud was your commitment to eke out a living. With nearly 80% of the population stuck in agriculture, the odds of being a philosophical poet were about as slim as convincing a cat to take a bath. Now, if you were fortunate enough, or perhaps just masochistic enough, to aspire to something beyond tilling the land, education was your ticket. But hold on, it wasn't all enlightenment and inspiration. Education in Imperial China was more akin to academic gladiatorship. The costs, let's just say it wasn't a free-for-all. Tuition fees, books, and that all-important calligraphy brush didn't come cheap. A family could easily sink a year's worth of income into preparing a son for the civil service exams. Ah, the civil service exams, a saga worthy of a Netflix miniseries. Introduced during the Sui dynasty around 605 AD, they were designed to pluck the brightest minds from the masses. In theory, it was a meritocracy. In practice, it was a pressure cooker of Confucian ideals and political machinations. Imagine spending years memorizing Confucian classics only to face an exam with a pass rate lower than a snowball's chance in a Beijing summer. In fact, in the Ming dynasty, the pass rate was about 1% for the first level. That's right, 1%. And that was just the beginning. If you did manage to pass, you had to scale 2 more increasingly difficult exams. Each level winnowed out even more candidates, until only a handful were left standing. The odds made modern college entrance exams look like a cakewalk. Yet, the allure of becoming a government official was irresistible. Beyond the prestige and power, the role came with relatively stable income, and let's face it, a healthy dose of social climbing. The entire system was a mixture of ambition and absurdity, with families investing everything they had into a single hopeful candidate. It was like betting your life savings on a single horse race. Only the horse was blindfolded, and the track was on fire. But let's not forget the shadow of Confucianism looming large over this entire setup. Confucian ideals dictated that a good official was a moral paragon, a Confucian gentleman whose primary duty was to serve the people. This was all very noble, but in reality, the system was ripe for corruption. The sheer cost of getting educated and passing the exams meant that only the wealthy could afford the necessary preparation, which somewhat skewed the concept of a true meritocracy. Meanwhile, the less academically inclined took up trades or became merchants, though the latter wasn't exactly seen as a noble pursuit. Merchants were often viewed with suspicion, as Confucian teachings placed more value on farming and scholarly work. So, a career in trade was more of a necessary evil than a respected calling. Yet, despite the social stigma, some merchants amassed significant wealth, proving once again that money talks, even if it's speaking a language nobody wants to hear. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across bustling streets and silent fields, the workday in Imperial China wound down. For the majority, it was a day that ended much as it began, with the weight of survival pressing down like an invisible yoke. Scholars might look to the heavens for inspiration, but most were too busy looking at the ground, making sure they didn't trip over the rough realities of life. This dichotomy, between the ideal and the real, the scholar and the laborer, defined the rhythm of life in Imperial China. It was a world where dreams of scholarly acclaim danced tantalizingly out of reach for most, while the harsh drumbeat of daily toil kept time. As we continue this journey through Imperial China, remember that the stories of grand scholars are but a thin veneer over the raw, unpolished lives that truly built the empire. Stay tuned, because the narrative only gets thicker from here. And just like that, as the sun reached its zenith, the stage was set for the midday meal, a grand theater where Imperial China's culinary drama unfolded in all its sumptuous and stark contrasts. Forget the notion that lunch was a mere pit stop before the afternoon grind. It was a social spectacle, a status symbol, and for the elite, a chance to out-feast their neighbors. But hold onto your chopsticks, because this was no egalitarian buffet. Let's start with the top of the food chain, the aristocrats and wealthy officials. Their midday meal was less about sustenance and more about sending a message. Picture long tables groaning under the weight of lacquered duck, shark fin soup, and a ballon, all served on porcelain so delicate it could practically double as a musical instrument. Hosting a lavish banquet wasn't just about satisfying appetites. It was about demonstrating your power and influence. Guests would be treated to an endless parade of dishes, each more extravagant than the last, the culinary equivalent of peacocks strutting in a courtyard. But here's the kicker. All this opulence came with a price tag that would make your wallet weep. Procuring exotic ingredients wasn't a simple matter of popping down to the local market. Sea cucumbers had to travel from distant coasts, while the finest teas came from the misty mountains of Fujian. Even a single dish could cost a small fortune, and maintaining such a lifestyle was a constant, costly performance. The elite weren't just dining, they were investing in their social capital, and a failed banquet could tarnish a reputation faster than you can say, pass the soy sauce. Meanwhile, for the majority of the population, lunch was a much more humble affair. Farmers and laborers, whose daily grind we've already explored, often dined on rice or noodles with a side of vegetables. Meat, when available, was a luxury enjoyed sparingly. For these folks, the midday meal was about fuel, pure and simple. Yet even here, the ingenuity of the common people shone through. Street vendors were the unsung heroes of the culinary world, bringing flavors to the masses at prices that wouldn't break the bank. These vendors were the original fast food joints, setting up shop on bustling corners and offering quick, affordable meals to workers on the go. Steamed buns, dumplings, and skewered meats were all on the menu, with vendors hawking their fare with the same enthusiasm as today's food truck operators. And let's not forget the logistics behind this street-side smorgasbord. The food supply chain was a complex web, connecting farmers, traders, and vendors in a dance as intricate as any royal banquet. The contrast between these two dining experiences was as sharp as a cleaver's edge. On one hand, you had the elite indulging in culinary excess, their meals a testament to their place in the social hierarchy. On the other, the masses, whose simpler fare was more about survival than spectacle. Yet, despite the disparity, food was a universal language, a common thread that tied together the diverse tapestry of Imperial China. Now, let's not romanticize the street food scene too much. The reality was often less Instagrammable and more gastrointestinally adventurous. Food safety standards were, shall we say, more of a suggestion than a rule. With no refrigeration, vendors relied on salting, drying and smoking to preserve their ingredients, and a bout of stomach trouble was just another part of the dining experience. Still, the vibrant street food culture was a testament to the resilience and resourcefulness of the people, who knew how to turn even the most modest ingredients into a feast for the senses. But beneath the surface of this vibrant food culture lurked deeper economic currents. The logistics of food production and distribution were a microcosm of the empire's broader economic landscape. The government, ever the watchful overseer, regulated grain prices and storage, ensuring that urban centers remained fed while rural areas bore the brunt of any shortages. This top-down approach was a blessing and a curse, providing stability but also highlighting the cracks in the empire's carefully constructed facade. As we digest these historical morsels, it's clear that food in Imperial China was more than just nourishment. It was a symbol of power, a tool for social mobility, and a reflection of the vast economic and social disparities that shaped daily life. So next time you sit down to a meal, consider this. In the grand banquet of history, we eat, and how we eat it reveals as much about us as any grand edifice or ancient text. And as we continue this journey through the annals of Imperial China, remember that every meal is a story waiting to be told. As we leave the lunchtime hustle behind and amble into the afternoon, you might be tempted to picture Imperial China as a land of lotus-filled ponds, where scholars meander through gardens, composing verses as effortlessly as leaves falling in autumn. Well, grab your reality check glasses, because we're about to dissect this picturesque myth with the precision of a calligrapher's brush. Sure, gardens were a thing. In fact, they were a big thing. The Chinese garden wasn't just a place to admire nature. It was a microcosm of the universe, a curated blend of rocks, water, and flora designed to embody harmony and balance. But let's not kid ourselves. These tranquil spaces were a luxury only the wealthiest could afford. Constructing and maintaining a garden could cost upwards of several hundred taels of silver a year, a sum that would have most farmers clutching their coin purses in horror. So, while the elite were busy crafting their personal Edens, the average citizen was more likely to be tending a vegetable patch than contemplating the cosmos. And speaking of the elite, within their manicured paradises, poetry writing was indeed a favored pastime. But before you idealize this as a free-spirited pursuit, remember that in the rigid hierarchy of Imperial China, poetry was less about self-expression and more about social currency. Mastery of the written word was a symbol of sophistication, a crucial skill for anyone looking to climb the social ladder. In the Tang dynasty, for instance, poetry was even a part of the civil service exams. Imagine cramming for a test today and being required to whip up a sonnet on demand. It was less about channeling your inner bard and more about demonstrating your cultural chops. Yet, the pressure to maintain cultural sophistication was immense. You didn't just need to know your quatrains from your couplets. You needed to know them with the kind of precision that could withstand the scrutiny of the literati. A poorly penned poem could ruin a reputation faster than a misstep in a Game of Thrones episode. And let's not forget the economic undercurrents. Parchment, brushes, and ink were not cheap. A quality inkstone alone could set you back several taels, and while today we might splurge on a designer handbag, back then, it was all about that perfect brushstroke. Now, let's wander into the realm of social gatherings, where the stakes were as high as the tea was hot. Hosting a gathering was akin to staging a political summit. The guest list was everything. Who you invited could make or break your social standing. It was a careful balancing act of power dynamics, where alliances were forged over cups of tea and reputations could rise or fall with a single misplaced word. These gatherings weren't just about leisure. They were arenas of influence where the political implications could ripple through the empire like a stone skipped across a pond. And where were the women in all this? Well, the role of women in these spaces was as complex as the intricate embroidery on their silk robes. While Confucian ideals often relegated women to the domestic sphere, the reality was nuanced. Women of the elite classes wielded subtle power, often acting as hostesses of these gatherings. In an era where direct political engagement was off-limits, women influenced through the art of conversation, the subtlety of a raised eyebrow, or the strategic placement of a compliment. The famed poet Lai Qingzhao, for instance, navigated these social waters with the grace of a swan, her verses capturing the essence of the human experience with a depth that resonated across the centuries. Yet, for most women, life was not a garden stroll, but a tightrope walk, balancing societal expectations with the harsh realities of daily life. The myth of harmonious leisure often glosses over the economic pressures that women faced, particularly in lower-class families where women were active participants in agriculture and trade. Their labor was crucial to the family's survival, and their contributions were as vital as they were undervalued. As we peel back the layers of this idealized image of afternoon leisure, what emerges is a portrait of a society where appearances were as curated as the gardens themselves. Beneath the surface of cultured sophistication lay a tapestry of societal pressures, economic constraints, and political maneuverings. The myth of leisurely afternoons was just that, a myth woven from threads of reality, but embroidered with the fantasies of later generations. So, the next time you imagine the afternoons of Imperial China, remember that behind every serene image was a world as complex and intricate as the calligraphy on a scholar's scroll. The reality was a blend of art and artifice, a dance between the ideal and the real, where every step was as calculated as a chess move. And as we prepare to delve into the evening hours, let's keep in mind that the story of Imperial China is far from over. The narrative continues to unfold, with each chapter as rich and revealing as the last. Stay tuned, because the night is still young, and history has plenty more stories to tell. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a twilight glow over the landscape of Imperial China, the day began its slow descent into night. And while you might envision a serene evening filled with poetic reflections and moonlit strolls, the reality had a bit more grit to it. After all, the empire didn't just tuck itself in with a lullaby and a good-night kiss. It had its share of night owls and nocturnal prowlers to contend with. Let's talk curfews. Yes, curfews, a concept that might seem oddly modern, but was very much a part of ancient Chinese life. These weren't just arbitrary rules set to keep kids from sneaking out. They were a serious affair. By the Tang dynasty, city gates weren't just closing for a cozy night in. They were shutting to keep out the unwanted elements that came with the cover of darkness. When night fell, so did the proverbial hammer, clamping down on movement to maintain order and security. Those who needed to be out after dark required special permits, and woe betide anyone caught without one. You see, this wasn't just about controlling the riffraff. It was about keeping the peace in an empire that was as vast as it was diverse. But let's not romanticize this as some benevolent attempt at public safety. The truth was, night was when the shadows came alive with less than savory activities. Crime was a real concern, and the government's grip wasn't just for show. The cost of maintaining stability wasn't cheap either. City watchmen had to be paid, and these nocturnal guardians weren't just there to flash a badge and call it a night. They were part of a complex urban ecosystem designed to deter the thieves and bandits who loved to exploit the cover of night. And what about those idyllic images of families winding down with evening tales and cups of tea? Well, let's just say the reality was a bit more complex. For many, the evening was a time to prepare for the next day's grind. This meant tending to the household, repairing tools, or engaging in the cottage industries that supplemented their income. You didn't just close shop and call it a day. You transitioned into a different kind of work, one that kept the household running smoothly. Maintaining this stability wasn't merely a matter of domestic bliss. It was essential for survival. Meanwhile, societal norms dictated much of what could and couldn't happen after dark. Women, for instance, were generally expected to remain indoors, their domain the home. This wasn't just about keeping them safe, it was about preserving the social order. The risk of scandal or impropriety was a constant specter, and the rules were designed to keep reputations intact. The stakes were high, and a misstep could mean disaster, not just for the individual but for the entire family. And let's not forget the myth of the peaceful, moonlit garden strolls. Sure, the elite might have enjoyed a leisurely walk through their meticulously crafted gardens, but this was a luxury far removed from the reality of most. For the average citizen, the night was a time to close the shutters and hope that the night watch was doing its job. Yet, despite all these precautions, the myth of the tranquil evening persists, a testament to the human desire for peace in the chaos. It's a narrative that has endured, perhaps because it offers a comforting contrast to the harsh realities of life. It speaks to a cultural aspiration for harmony and order, even when the night was anything but. As we wrap up our journey through a day in Imperial China, it's worth reflecting on the enduring myths and what they reveal about the society that spawned them. The image of a serene night, free from worry or strife, was as much a fantasy then as it is now. It's a reminder that myths often serve as mirrors, reflecting the hopes and dreams of those who create them. So, as you drift off to sleep, remember that the history of Imperial China is as vast and varied as the empire itself. Behind every myth lies a reality, sometimes stark, sometimes surprising, always fascinating. And isn't that the beauty of history? It's a never-ending story, filled with lessons, legends, and the lingering echoes of lives long past. Sweet dreams, history buffs. The night may be dark, but the past is always illuminating. In the dusty plains of South Asia, somewhere around 2600 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization was busy doing something that would make even the most diligent modern city planners nod in approval, embracing urban planning with a flair that rivaled the best of today's smart cities. While some of us are still grappling with the complexities of waste management, looking at you, New York City, these ancient folks had it all figured out. We're talking about cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, where sanitation was as integral to life as a good Wi-Fi signal is to ours. Now, let's set the stage. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't just any city. This place was a bustling metropolis that could have hosted its own ancient version of house hunters. With an estimated population of over 40,000 people, it was one of the largest settlements of the ancient world. But here's the kicker. These people knew how to live. Their streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, akin to the organized chaos of Manhattan, minus the yellow cabs and hot dog vendors. It's like they had a GPS before GPS was even a twinkle in humanity's eye. But what really sets the Indus Valley cities apart from their contemporaries is their approach to sanitation. Imagine a time when the Roman Empire was still centuries away from figuring out aqueducts, yet the Indus Valley was already flushing waste away like it was nobody's business. These cities had an elaborate drainage system that would make modern engineers weep with envy. Each house was connected to a network of covered drains, and the streets were equipped with manholes, not unlike those dotting our urban landscapes today. That's right, manholes in 2600 BCE. It's almost as if the Indus folks had a time machine and a penchant for urban hygiene. Let's pause for a second and appreciate the ingenuity. In a world where the bathroom, for most, was little more than a hole in the ground, the Indus Valley folks were living it up with private bathrooms in their homes. And I'm not just talking about a bucket in the corner. These bathrooms were sophisticated, with sloped floors leading to drains, which then connected to the city's sewer system. It's like they had a personal flush system in an era when people still thought rain was the work of capricious guards. Moving over to Harappa, it's another shining example of ancient urban brilliance. Much like its sister city, Harappa boasted a population that could rival a small town today. Its layout was a testament to the meticulous planning that defined the Indus Valley civilization. The streets were designed with purpose, wide enough for carts and chariots to pass comfortably without the risk of a fender bender. And the sanitation, just as impressive. The drainage system here was equally advanced, with brick-lined sewers that would carry waste away from the residential areas. Talk about keeping up appearances. But why did sanitation matter so much to the Indus Valley people? The answer lies in their understanding of community health. It's evident that they recognized the importance of cleanliness and public health long before it became a hashtag trend. Perhaps they learned the hard way after watching what happens when waste is left to fester. Or maybe they just couldn't stand the smell. Either way, their commitment to cleanliness was not just for show. It was an early recognition of the relationship between sanitation and health, a concept that would take other civilizations centuries to fully grasp. Of course, every good story comes with its myths, and the Indus Valley is no exception. There's a romantic notion that these cities were perfect, a utopia of sorts. While it's true they were ahead of their time, it's important to remember that they were not immune to the same problems we face today. For instance, Archaeological evidence suggests that they dealt with issues like flooding, which could wreak havoc on their meticulously planned cities. Just imagine the frustration of seeing your hard work washed away because Mother Nature decided to throw a tantrum. Furthermore, the myth of a peaceful, egalitarian society can be tempting to buy into. While it's nice to think of the Indus Valley as a place where everyone lived in harmony, the reality is more nuanced. The absence of palaces and obvious signs of wealth inequality has led some to speculate about their social structure. But let's not kid ourselves. Just because we haven't found evidence of class disparity doesn't mean it didn't exist. People are people, after all, with all the complexities and contradictions that come with being human. As we continue to excavate and explore the remnants of these ancient cities, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The Indus Valley civilization was a trailblazer in urban planning and sanitation. They laid the groundwork for systems that would not be seen again for thousands of years in other parts of the world. And while we might chuckle at the idea of ancient people dealing with sewage, it's worth remembering that their innovations allowed them to thrive in a way that many civilizations would envy. In the end, the story of the Indus Valley is a testament to human ingenuity and the eternal quest for a better, cleaner life. Whether it's dealing with waste or planning a city, the lessons from Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa resonate with us even today. So, the next time you flush a toilet or stroll down a well-paved street, give a nod to the ancient urbanites who were doing it all before it was cool. They might not have had smartphones or the internet, but they sure knew how to build a city that could stand the test of time, at least until nature decided otherwise. Let's dive deeper into the underground labyrinth that was the Indus Valley's plumbing system. It's time to unearth the secret star of the show, their brick-lined drainage systems, the unsung heroes that kept the cities squeaky, or should I say, relatively smell-free. The Indus engineers were like the ancient world's Mac jivers, using gravity as their trusty sidekick to guide waste away from homes with the finesse of a ballet dancer avoiding a puddle. And before you shrug off the importance of bricks, let me remind you, these were not your average run-of-the-mill stones. We're talking meticulously fired bricks, each measuring about 7 by 14 by 28 centimeters, that were laid with precision only rivaled by an obsessive-compulsive Lego enthusiast. Now, why bricks, you ask? Well, unlike the mud bricks used by many of their contemporaries, which tended to dissolve faster than an ice cream cone on a hot summer's day, these fired bricks were the real deal. They were durable, weather-resistant, and surprisingly uniform, making them perfect for constructing sewers that could withstand the test of time and the occasional monsoon. These brick-lined drains ran beneath the streets, efficiently whisking away waste and rainwater, preventing the kind of urban flooding that would have sent ancient insurance premiums through the roof if such a concept existed back then. But let's not get too carried away with the technicalities. The real genius was in how these systems were integrated into the urban fabric. Each house had its own private bathrooms connected to the main sewer line, a setup that would make any modern plumber nod in approval. The streets had strategically placed manholes, yes, even back then, to allow for maintenance and cleaning. It's almost as if the Indus Valley folks were preparing for a future episode of Ancient City Plumbers. And then there were the public baths, the crown jewels of Indus Valley plumbing innovation. Picture the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, a grand structure measuring 12 by 7 meters with a depth of about 4 meters. This wasn't just a body of water, it was a social hub, a place where the community gathered not just to wash off the grime of the day, but to catch up on the latest gossip. Think of it as the ancient version of a water cooler chat. The bath was lined with waterproof bricks and had a sophisticated drainage system that kept the water fresh, a feature that would make even the most luxurious modern spas green with envy. The importance of these baths went beyond hygiene and social interaction. They played a crucial role in the economic life of the cities. The baths were like the Starbucks of their time, where business deals were struck, alliances were formed, and perhaps even a few romantic trysts took place. And let's not forget the religious aspect. Bathing was often a ritualistic act, a way to purify oneself before engaging in sacred activities. In this context, the baths were more than just a place to scrub off dirt. They were integral to the spiritual and economic fabric of society. But if you're imagining, A utopian bath scene with everyone splashing around in perfect harmony. Hold that thought. The reality was likely more complex. While the absence of ostentatious wealth disparity is notable, it's a stretch to assume everyone got along like a bunch of happy rubber ducks. Human nature, with all its quirks and foibles, probably ensured there were disputes over bath times, much like modern office arguments over who left the dishes in the sink. And speaking of modern parallels, let's talk about gravity. No, not the metaphorical kind that keeps us grounded in reality, but the literal, ever-present force that the Indus Valley engineers harnessed with a sophistication that would give Isaac Newton a run for his apple. By strategically sloping the drains, they used gravity to their advantage, ensuring that waste flowed away from the residential areas. It's a simple concept, yet its execution was nothing short of brilliant. While other civilizations were still figuring out which way water flowed, the Indus Valley folks were busy creating a system that could rival even today's standards. But all was not sunshine and roses in the world of ancient plumbing. The myth of seamless sanitation is a tempting one, but just like any modern city, the Indus Valley had its share of challenges. Seasonal flooding was a recurring nightmare, capable of turning their carefully crafted urban landscapes into a soggy mess. And let's not forget the maintenance. Those manholes weren't just for show. Someone had to keep the system running smoothly, a thankless task that probably involved more than a few grumbles about clogged drains and misplaced bricks. Yet, despite these hurdles, the Indus Valley's approach to sanitation was a testament to their ingenuity and foresight. They understood that clean cities were not just pleasant to live in, but crucial for the health and prosperity of their society. While other civilizations were battling plagues and pestilence, the Indus Valley was busy setting the standard for urban hygiene. So, as you go about your day, give a nod to these ancient innovators. They might not have had Wi-Fi, smartphones, or even the concept of a 9-to-5 job, but they sure knew a thing or two about building cities that could stand the test of time, or at least until Mother Nature decided to shake things up. As we continue this journey through the annals of ancient sanitation, remember, the past is not just a dusty relic, but a mirror reflecting our own struggles and triumphs. And if nothing else, it's a reminder that even thousands of years ago, people were still figuring out how to deal with life's inevitable messiness. While it's tempting to romanticize the Indus Valley sanitation system as the ancient world's answer to modern urban bliss, let's dig into what really drove these folks to prioritize cleanliness like it was the ultimate status symbol. Spoiler alert, it wasn't just about avoiding the whiff of yesterday's fish stew. Now, you're probably wondering how a society that left behind no decipherable written records managed to pull off such an impressive feat of urban hygiene. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, only with fewer colors and more mud bricks. The key lies in their societal norms and cultural values. The Indus Valley people, it seems, had a thing for order and symmetry. It's as if they collectively decided chaos was for barbarians and opted for a lifestyle where everything had its place, including waste. This obsession with order and cleanliness wasn't just about keeping their sandals dry. It was woven into the very fabric of their society. Take, for instance, the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro. Beyond its role as a community spa and gossip hub, it was a symbol of ritual purity. Bathing wasn't just a way to scrub off the dust of the day. It was a spiritual cleanse, a way to wash away the impurities of the soul. And in a culture where spiritual and physical cleanliness were intertwined, good plumbing wasn't just a convenience, it was a moral imperative. But let's not get too carried away by this idyllic image of ancient Zen. The Indus Valley's commitment to sanitation wasn't purely altruistic. There was a practical side to their fastidiousness. With populations that could rival a modern small city, disease was a constant threat. And while they didn't have Twitter to spread the word about the latest outbreak, they understood one fundamental truth. Cleanliness could mean the difference between life and death. In this context, their sanitation systems were less about luxury and more about survival. Now, here's where the plot thickens. Despite their impressive urban planning and sanitation systems, the Indus Valley civilization wasn't immune to the same societal tensions that plague us today. The myth of their perfect society, where everyone lived in harmony and nobody ever quarreled over whose turn it was to clean the manhole, is just that, a myth. While the absence of palatial structures might suggest an egalitarian society, it doesn't take a historian to know that human nature is a bit more complicated. For instance, let's talk about wealth and power. The lack of grandiose structures might have led some to believe the Indus Valley was a classless society, where everyone sang cumbaya around the communal bath. But just because we haven't unearthed any golden thrones doesn't mean there wasn't a hierarchy. Power dynamics could have played out in subtler ways, like who got the prime bathing times or the best locations for their homes, conveniently uphill from the drainage flow. And then there's the enigma of their disappearance. Around 1900 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization began to decline, leaving behind a mystery that would baffle archaeologists and conspiracy theorists alike. Was it climate change, resource depletion, or perhaps a massive flood that finally washed away their meticulously planned cities? Or maybe it was the gradual erosion of their social fabric, as internal tensions bubbled to the surface like a clogged drain. The truth, as always, is likely a cocktail of these factors, shaken, not stirred, by the passage of time. But let's not dwell too long on their downfall. It's the legacy they left behind that continues to captivate us. The Indus Valley's commitment to sanitation wasn't just a product of their time. It was a vision of what could be. Their achievements in urban planning and public health were a blueprint for the future, a reminder that even in a world without digital distractions, people were capable of extraordinary feats of engineering and social organization. So, as we marvel at their ingenuity, let's not forget the human side of the story. The Indus Valley people weren't just engineers and city planners. They were dreamers and doers, grappling with the same challenges we face today. Their story is a testament to the enduring human spirit, the drive to create order out of chaos, and the relentless pursuit of a better, cleaner life. And as we continue to unearth their secrets, let's keep an eye out for the lessons they left behind, because while their cities may have crumbled, their legacy is far from buried. And speaking of legacies, let's turn our gaze toward the economic and political engine that kept the Indus Valley sanitation marvels chugging along. This wasn't just some ancient utopia where everyone woke up with a song and a synchronized flush. No, it was a thriving civilization with the economic savvy of a Wall Street broker and the political acumen of a modern city council, albeit one that presumably didn't have to worry about election cycles or Twitter scandals. First off, let's talk trade, because if there's one thing that greased the wheels of the Indus Valley machine, it was commerce, baby. We're talking about a sprawling trade network that stretched from the dusty plains of Mesopotamia to the glittering shores of the Arabian Peninsula. The Indus folks weren't just bartering beads and bangles. They were a key player in a Bronze Age free market that would make today's globalists blush. They traded everything from lapis lazuli, a blue stone so coveted it could make a peacock jealous, to intricately crafted pottery that would look right at home in a modern art gallery. Now, how does trade relate to sanitation, you ask? Well, all that wealth flowing into the Indus Valley didn't just line the pockets of the elite, though let's not pretend those in power didn't enjoy their share of the spoils. It funded public works, including the sophisticated sanitation systems that kept their cities from turning into ancient cesspools. Think of it as a proto-taxation system where everyone chipped in to maintain public health and infrastructure. In a sense, trade was the lifeblood that allowed the Indus Valley to innovate and sustain its urban planning genius. But who was calling the shots in this ancient metropolis? With no flashy palaces or inscriptions bragging about divine rulers, the political structure of the Indus Valley remains as elusive as the Loch Ness Monster. Some theories suggest a council of elites or merchants ran the show, opting for a more communal form of governance rather than the top-down autocracies seen in places like Egypt or Mesopotamia. It was a society where governance was perhaps more about consensus and less about one dude with a fancy hat declaring himself God King. This decentralized power structure might explain why the Indus Valley people focused on community-oriented projects like sanitation rather than building massive monuments to their own egos, while pharaohs were busy erecting pyramids that screamed, "Look at me, I'm important." The Indus Valley folks were busy making sure their drains didn't back up. It was a choice that highlights a unique set of priorities, one that valued public health and urban efficiency over ostentatious displays of wealth and power. Now let's flip the coin and take a peek at their contemporaries. Over in Egypt, the Nile was the lifeline, but it also dictated much of the political power. The pharaohs, considered living gods, had a direct heartline to the divine and ruled with an iron fist, ensuring that the pyramids were as much a testament to their reign as they were a burial site. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, city-states were embroiled in a constant game of thrones, with kings and queens vying for land and influence. Here, sanitation wasn't exactly top of the agenda. Instead, they were more focused on building ziggurats, those impressive, stepped towers that made it clear who was boss. But back to the Indus Valley, where the absence of overtly hierarchical structures raises the tantalizing question. Could they have been on to something with their more egalitarian approach? The lack of grandiose tombs or statues could suggest a society that placed higher value on functional public works than on megalomaniacal self-memorialization. That said, let's not get too starry-eyed. The reality could be as mundane as practical necessity. When your city is liable to flood every monsoon season, a working drainage system is worth 1,000 statues. As trade routes crisscrossed the region, they not only brought goods, but also ideas. The Indus Valley's engagement with other cultures likely influenced their urban planning and governance. This cross-pollination of ideas was a two-way street, with the Indus Valley exporting not just goods, but perhaps even some of their societal values. Imagine an ancient Mesopotamian trader returning home with tales of cities where waste didn't pile up in the streets. It might not have sparked a sanitation revolution overnight, but it certainly planted seeds. Yet, despite their innovative spirit, the Indus Valley folks weren't immune to the pitfalls of rapid urbanization. As their cities grew, so did the complexity of maintaining their sanitation systems. This wasn't just a matter of building and forgetting. It required ongoing maintenance and adaptation, particularly in the face of environmental challenges. Seasonal flooding could wreak havoc on their meticulously planned infrastructure, turning a well-oiled machine into a muddy, dysfunctional mess. Maintaining these systems was a full-time job, and one imagines the ancient equivalent of a Department of Public Works, complete with frustrated workers grumbling about clogged drains and the odd missing manhole cover. And now, let's tackle a myth that often crops up like an unruly whack-a-mole, the notion of a perfectly harmonious society. The absence of warfare artifacts or fortifications has led some to speculate that the Indus Valley was a pacifist paradise. But hold your horses. The lack of evidence isn't evidence of lack. Just because they weren't constantly at war doesn't mean they were sitting around braiding each other's hair in peaceful solidarity. Internal tensions, resource disputes, or even good old-fashioned human stubbornness could have sown discord beneath the surface. The Indus Valley story is a reminder of the delicate balance between economic prosperity and social stability. While trade and governance provided the foundation for their sanitation marvels, it was the society's values, both practical and ideological, that sustained them. Yet, as with any civilization, change was inevitable. Whether it was due to environmental shifts, source depletion, or societal changes, the factors that once supported their thriving urban centers eventually contributed to their decline. As we wrap up this chapter of our journey through the Indus Valley, let's remember that history is as much about the questions we ask as the answers we find. The Indus Valley civilization challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about ancient societies and the forces that shape them. It's a story of innovation and human resilience, a testament to the power of collective effort and shared values. And while their cities may now lie in ruins, the legacy of the Indus Valley continues to echo through the ages, inviting us to delve deeper, question more, and perhaps learn a thing or two about building a society that can stand the test of time, or at least until the next monsoon. So, where did it all go wrong for the Indus Valley civilization? Picture a society at its zenith, bustling with trade, advanced urban planning, and a commitment to cleanliness that would make even the most fastidious germaphobe proud. Yet, by 1900 BCE, this beacon of ancient innovation began to flicker. It's like watching your favorite TV series fall apart in the final season. Frustrating, mysterious, and a bit anticlimactic. The decline of the Indus Valley is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, served with a side of ancient drama. Was it climate change that turned their fertile plains into a dust bowl? Geological studies suggest shifts in monsoon patterns and river courses, particularly the drying up of the Gagahakra River, might have played a part. It's almost as if Mother Nature decided to reroute her own plumbing, leaving the Indus folks high and dry. Or maybe it was a series of devastating floods that left their urban infrastructure more waterlogged than a soggy sandwich. Resource depletion is another suspect. As their cities grew, so did the demand for materials like timber and soil, which could have led to deforestation and soil erosion. It's the classic tale of a civilization outgrowing its resources, a theme as old as history itself, and as relevant as your latest smartphone upgrade. If you think about it, the Indus Valley folks were the original victims of urban sprawl, long before it became a buzzword at city planning conferences. And then there's the theory of internal strife. Imagine a society that, despite its apparent egalitarian vibe, was not immune to the social tensions that come with growth. Maybe the lack of ostentatious monuments meant there were power struggles simmering just beneath the surface, like a pressure cooker waiting to blow. Without clear evidence, we can only speculate, but it's not hard to imagine that the same human dynamics we see today, ambition, competition, and the occasional political squabble, were at play. But here's the kicker. The archaeological record gives us no grand finale, no conclusive evidence of a catastrophic event. Instead, the cities seem to have been abandoned gradually, like a neighborhood slowly losing its charm. The fact that we're still piecing together their story from shards of pottery and crumbling bricks speaks volumes about how much we still don't know. Yet, the enigma of their downfall doesn't diminish the legacy of their achievements. Those sophisticated sanitation systems weren't just about keeping the cities clean. They were a reflection of a society that valued public health and communal well-being, a lesson that resonates today as cities grapple with their own infrastructure challenges. The Indus Valley people understood the importance of design and foresight in urban planning. They were the ancient world's equivalent of a TED talk on sustainable living, delivered in the form of brick-lined drains and public baths. Modern urban planners could take a page from the Indus Valley playbook. As cities around the world face issues like water management, waste disposal, and climate resilience, the ancient practices of the Indus Valley offer valuable insights. Their emphasis on integrated urban systems and communal resources could inspire new approaches to building cities that are not just livable, but thrive under environmental pressures. It's a testament to the enduring wisdom of their designs that we still find them relevant today. So, what did the Indus Valley people know that we've forgotten? Perhaps it's the understanding that true progress isn't measured by towering monuments or sprawling metropolises, but by the quality of life they afford their inhabitants. The real legacy of the Indus Valley lies not in their disappearance, but in the echoes of their innovations that continue to inform our quest for better, more sustainable urban environments. As we wrap up this dive into the ancient world, let's remember that history is not just a chronicle of events, but a tapestry of human experiences, ambitions, and dreams. The Indus Valley civilization might have vanished, but its story remains a powerful reminder of the potential for human ingenuity and the fragility of the societies we build. It challenges us to question, to learn, and to strive for a future where, perhaps, we can avoid the pitfalls that led to their decline. In the end, the story of the Indus Valley is as much about what we choose to see as it is about what remains hidden. It's a tale of mystery and innovation, of a society that reached for the stars in its own way, and of the timeless human spirit that continues to ask, how can we build a world that stands the test of time? As we ponder this question, let's give a nod to the ancient urbanites who dared to dream big and left us with the challenge of doing the same. The ancient world wasn't all togas and laurels. Sometimes it was about scrappy upstarts who clawed their way to power. Cue the Sasanian Empire, Persia's last hurrah before the Islamic conquest. It's the 3rd century AD, and Persia's playing the comeback kid after the Parthians, those perpetual partygoers who managed an empire with all the finesse of a cat herding mice. Their mismanagement left a power vacuum, so gaping you could hear the wind whistle through it. Enter Ardashir-I, a man with a vision and a sword to make it happen. If you've ever thought about flipping a house Imagine Ardashir doing it with an empire. Around 224 AD, he wasn't just rearranging furniture, he was demolishing walls and adding a second story. The Parthians, bless their hearts, had been hanging on to power like a threadbare tapestry, and Ardashir took one look and decided it was time for a whole new design. Picture this. A guy from the province of Persis, modern-day Fars province, decides he's had enough of Parthian ineptitude and starts a mini-revolution. Within years, he's not just the landlord of a province, he's the emperor of a revamped Persia. Ardashir was no slouch when it came to empire building. He had a knack for expansion that would impress even the most ambitious real estate mogul today. This wasn't about buying beachfront properties. It was about strategic annexations and consolidating power. Ardashir's early campaigns were like a masterclass in hostile takeovers. By 226 AD, he'd already faced off with the last Parthian king, Artabanus Roman IV, and let's just say, Artabanus discovered the hard way that Ardashir meant business. This decisive victory at the Battle of Hormozgan effectively put the Sasanian in Sasanian Empire. Now, no empire worth its salt could thrive without a little cultural cohesion, and that's where Zoroastrianism came in. Think of it as Ardashir's PR campaign, but instead of social media influencers, he had priests and fire temples. Zoroastrianism wasn't just a religion, it was practically a state ideology, neatly tying together the empire's disparate regions. In a world where religious unity could be a game-changer, Ardashir wielded it like a pro. He turned Zoroastrianism into the empire's official religion, which was as much about divine favor as it was about keeping the empire on the same page. Sure, there's a romantic notion that Ardashir was a pious man, but let's not kid ourselves. This was realpolitik with a side of spirituality. The fire temples weren't just places of worship. They were symbols of unity and Persian identity, strategic as much as sacred. While the image of an empire united under the light of Ahura Mazda is poetic, the reality was more like a well-oiled machine running on both faith and fear. The Sasanian expansion was no peaceful cohabitation exercise. Ardashir's empire was built on the bones of rivals, a fact conveniently glossed over when people talk about the glory days of Persia. But that's history for you, an elegant tapestry of triumphs and tragedies, woven together with threads of ambition, and occasionally a bit of bloodshed. Ardashir wasn't just a ruler, he was a visionary with a sword, using it to carve out a legacy that would echo through centuries, long after the last embers of the Parthian bonfire had fizzled out. Thus began the Sasanian Empire, a testament to the idea that sometimes the best way to rebuild is to start from scratch, even if it means knocking down a few walls, and maybe a Parthian or two. Speaking of knocking down walls, let's fast forward a bit from Ardashir's DIY empire building to his successor, WWII, who brought the Sasanian Empire into its golden age with a flair for drama that would make Shakespeare blush. WWII, the maestro of multitasking, wasn't content with just ruling. He was out to leave a legacy that would make future historians reach for the superlatives. You see, around 240 AD, WWII took the helm, and it was like handing the keys to a luxury sports car to someone who knows how to drive fast and look good doing it. WWII was the kind of guy who could juggle warfare, architecture, and hostage-taking like he was running a three-ring circus. Let's start with his favorite pastime, tangling with the Romans. Now, the romanticized version of history paints the Sasanian-Roman rivalry as a seamless, perpetual slugfest. But reality, as usual, is a tad messier. Their relationship was more like a soap opera, full of unexpected alliances, betrayals, and the occasional dramatic kidnapping. One of WWII's most legendary feats was the capture of Roman Emperor Valerian in 260 AD. Yes, you heard that right. WWII didn't just defeat Valerian, he took him prisoner. Talk about a power move. Imagine Valerian's surprise when he realized he wasn't just losing a battle, but also his freedom. This wasn't just a victory, it was a PR dream for WWII. The ancient world equivalent of a viral tweet, this event was plastered across rock reliefs for all to see. Valerian's capture became a symbol of Sasanian might, a propaganda coup that WWII milked for all it was worth. But let's not kid ourselves. Taking an emperor hostage is a bit like winning the lottery, and then having to figure out where to cash the check without getting mugged. WWII used this leverage to negotiate better terms for the empire, including territorial gains and a hefty ransom. It was a masterclass in turning military success into diplomatic advantage, proving that sometimes the pen, or in this case the chisel, is mightier than the sword. Now, while Shapur was busy playing chess with the Romans, he was also an architect at heart. He knew that an empire wasn't just about borders. It was about building something to last. Just look at the city of Bishapur, an urban sprawl that sprang up under his watch, boasting grand palaces and intricate mosaics. This wasn't just a place to live. It was a statement piece, showcasing Sasanian architectural prowess and cultural sophistication. Bishapur wasn't built in a day, but it sure left an impression that lasted centuries. Yet, for all his achievements, Shapur's reign was far from a fairy tale. The Sasanian Empire, like any other, was a delicate balancing act of politics, economics, and sheer willpower. The economy was a patchwork of agriculture, trade, and taxation, with the Silk Road serving as the empire's financial lifeline. Control over these trade routes was both a blessing and a curse, bringing wealth, but also making the empire a target for every ambitious warlord with a grudge. Shapur's reign also saw the rise of what might be called strategic alliances with various nomadic tribes and regional powers. These alliances were less about friendship and more about mutual benefit. It was the political equivalent of inviting the neighborhood bully to your birthday party to keep him from crashing it. These alliances helped stabilize the empire's borders, but they were as fickle as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, useful but not to be trusted blindly. In dismantling the myth of an unyielding Sasanian-Roman rivalry, it's crucial to appreciate the empire's clever use of propaganda. Shapur wasn't just a ruler, he was a storyteller, spinning narratives that bolstered his image and legitimized his rule. The rock reliefs depicting his victories were more than mere art. They were the Instagram posts of their day, curated to project strength and divine favor. The truth behind these images was often less glamorous, with battles fought in harsh conditions and victories won at great cost. But that's the dual nature of history, equal parts legend and ledger, romance and reality. Beneath the grandeur was a world of political machinations, economic constraints, and human ambition. Shapur, with his flair for the dramatic, embodied this complex tapestry, weaving his own narrative into the fabric of history. As his empire glittered under the desert sun, the Sasanian Empire reached its zenith, a testament to the power of vision, diplomacy, and the occasional well-timed hostage-taking. And so, the story of the Sasanian Empire under Shapur doesn't conclude here. It continues to unravel with plots thicker than a Persian carpet and a cast of characters as colorful as the mosaics of Bishapur. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the saga of an empire that danced on the edge of a knife, ever balancing between glory and ruin. As we ease into the next chapter of this Sasanian saga, let's pull back the ornate curtain of imperial glamour and peek into the inner workings of an empire that could give even the most ambitious corporate boardroom a run for its money. The Sasanian Empire, in its heyday, wasn't just about grand conquests and ostentatious architecture. No, beneath its shiny exterior lay a complex socio-political machine that kept the empire ticking like a well-wound Persian clock. First off, let's talk bureaucracy. If you thought modern-day red tape was a headache, imagine dealing with a system so intricate that it makes the IRS look like a lemonade stand. The Sasanian administration was a marvel of organization, a precursor to the Byzantine maze of governance that would follow. At the top of this bureaucratic pyramid sat the Shahanshah, or King of Kings, wielding power with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer at a tea party. Beneath him was a hierarchy of nobles and officials, each with their designated roles, ensuring that the empire didn't just run, it sprinted. But power wasn't distributed like candy at a parade. Oh no, it was more like a game of chess, with each piece carefully placed to maintain the balance of control. The Sasanian administration was divided into several key offices, including the Grand Vizier, the chief financial officer, and the head of the military. These weren't just ceremonial titles. These were positions of genuine influence and responsibility. The Grand Vizier, for instance, acted as the king's right-hand man, a role that came with enough authority to make or break careers faster than you can say court intrigue. Meanwhile, the empire's economic heart pumped thanks to its strategic hold on the Silk Road, that ancient superhighway of commerce stretching from China to the Mediterranean. The Sasanians were like the toll booth operators of antiquity, collecting taxes and tariffs from caravans laden with silk, spices, and other exotic goods. It was a lucrative business, to say the least. Imagine collecting fees from every Amazon package crossing your doorstep, and you get the idea. This control translated into significant revenue, bolstering the empire's coffers and funding its military exploits and architectural ambitions. However, let's not romanticize this too much. The prosperity of the Sasanian Empire was not a universal experience. The wealth of trade and taxation didn't exactly trickle down like a gentle mountain stream. Instead, it pooled at the top, leaving the common folk to navigate the economic rapids below. This was an era where class distinctions were as rigid as the rock reliefs depicting royal victories. The upper echelons of society, including the nobility and wealthy merchants, lived in opulence, their lives a never-ending banquet of luxury and leisure. Contrast this with the everyday life of the average Sasanian citizen, who was more likely to be found toiling in the fields or crafting goods in workshops. The empire's economy was heavily reliant on agriculture, with wheat, barley, and dates as staple crops. Despite the romanticized images of lush Persian gardens, farming was backbreaking work, subject to the whims of weather and warfare. Peasants worked the land under a tax system that could be as oppressive as a summer's day is long, with dues demanded in cash, kind, or labor. The Sasanian social structure was a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk between the haves and the have-nots. While the nobility and clergy enjoyed privileges and power, the lower classes faced a reality that was less about glory and more about survival. It was a world where social mobility was about as probable as a camel passing through the eye of a needle. This stratification wasn't just a quirk of the system, it was its backbone, ensuring that the ruling class remained firmly in the saddle while the rest held on for dear life. Yet, despite these class disparities, the empire managed to maintain a semblance of cohesion. How, you ask? Partly through the very bureaucracy that seemed so cumbersome. The Sasanians were adept at managing their diverse populace, using a combination of administration, religion, and the occasional show of force to keep the peace. The Zoroastrian clergy played a pivotal role here, acting as both spiritual leaders and political allies. Their influence was immense, shaping policies and guiding the moral compass of the empire. But this wasn't a utopia of clerical wisdom. Zoroastrian priests wielded their power with a zeal that could rival a modern-day corporate lobbyist. They were instrumental in reinforcing the status quo, promoting a worldview that blended religious doctrine with political expediency. This mix of faith and governance was a double-edged sword, providing stability while stifling dissent. The fire temples, with their eternal flames, were as much about maintaining spiritual order as they were about controlling the narrative. Speaking of narratives, the Sasanians were masters of myth-making. The image of a unified, prosperous empire was a story they told with gusto, a tale spun to dazzle both subjects and rivals. But peel back the layers, and you'll find a reality marked by economic inequalities and political tensions. For all its grandeur, the Sasanian Empire was a construct held together by ambition and, at times, sheer willpower. The romanticized vision of a golden age was just that, a vision, one that glossed over the cracks in favor of a more palatable picture. As we delve deeper, the socio-political structure of the Sasanian Empire reveals itself not as a monolith of power, but as a complex web of relationships and hierarchies. It was a world where the balance of power was as delicate as a Persian miniature, each stroke contributing to the larger masterpiece. The reality, as always, was far messier than the legend, a tapestry woven from threads of ambition, commerce, and human endeavor. And so, as we navigate this empire of contradictions, keep your eyes peeled for the truth lurking beneath the veneer of prosperity. The Sasanian Empire, like all great civilizations, was a study in contrasts, a testament to the heights of human achievement and the depths of human folly. Stay tuned as our journey through this ancient world continues, delving into the economic engines and societal structures that kept the Sasanian heart beating in the face of time's relentless march. As we ease further into the labyrinth of the Sasanian Empire, let's switch gears and shine a spotlight on WWII, a ruler who could have been the poster child for the phrase Renaissance man, if it hadn't been coined a millennium later. Khusro, reigning from 531 to 579 AD, was a king who wielded both the sword and the scroll with equal flair, earning him the nickname of the Philosopher King. He was like the Steve Jobs of his era, but instead of reinventing phones, he was busy rebooting an entire empire. Khusro I ascended to the throne at a time when the Sasanian Empire was a bit like a vintage car that needed constant tinkering to keep running. The state machinery was creaking under the weight of an expansive realm, and Khusro knew that to keep his empire from stalling, he needed to revamp everything from military strategies to educational policies. Think of him as the ultimate multitasker, blending the art of war with the subtleties of statesmanship. One of Khusro's key military achievements was his campaign against the Hephthalites, a nomadic group who had been the thorn in Persia's side for far too long. In 557 AD, Khusro teamed up with the Western Turks to deliver a knockout punch to these pesky invaders. This alliance was like the ancient world's version of a buddy cop movie, two unlikely partners joining forces to take down the bad guys. The victory opened up new opportunities for trade and territorial expansion, and Khusro's military acumen was solidified. Yet, while the battlefronts lit up with the fires of conquest, there was more to Khusro's reign than just military might. Khusro was all about building bridges, literally and metaphorically. Under his rule, infrastructure projects flourished. Roads were improved, canals were dug, and cities were fortified. The Narawan Canal, for example, was a monumental project that not only improved irrigation, but also boosted the agricultural output of the region. This wasn't just about showing off engineering prowess. It was about ensuring the empire's breadbasket was well stocked. Khusro knew that a well-fed populace was less likely to revolt, proving once again that the quickest way to a citizen's heart is through their stomach. Education was another cornerstone of Khusro's reign. He was a patron of the Academy of Gundishapur, a center of learning that attracted scholars from across the known world. This was the ancient equivalent of gathering all the best minds from TED talks and giving them an open mic. The Academy became a melting pot of Greek, Indian, and Persian knowledge, a testament to Khusro's vision of a culturally rich and intellectually vigorous empire. He understood that knowledge was power, and by fostering education, he was investing in the empire's future, one scholar at a time. However, Khusro's reign wasn't all innovation and enlightenment. Maintaining an empire that spanned from the Euphrates to the Indus was like juggling flaming swords while riding a unicycle. Internally, the empire was a powder keg of potential dissent, with nobles and clergy jostling for power. Khusro's reforms, while progressive, ruffled more than a few feathers. His tax reforms aimed to streamline revenue collection, but to the nobility, it felt like their pockets were being picked by an overzealous tax collector. The clergy, too, grumbled as Khusro attempted to curb their influence, balancing between religious orthodoxy and a more secular administration. Externally, the Romans were a perpetual headache. The relationship between the Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire was like a long, complicated Facebook status. It's complicated. In 540 AD, Khusro marched on Antioch, delivering a blow to the Byzantines that was as much about prestige as it was about power. The sack of Antioch was a message, loud and clear, that Persia was not to be trifled with. But such victories came at a cost, straining the empire's resources and stretching its military thin. And then there were the economic woes. The Silk Road was both a boon and a bane, a source of wealth and a magnet for trouble. Controlling this vital artery was essential for the empire's prosperity, but it also meant constant vigilance against bandits and rival powers. Khusro had to balance the books like a seasoned accountant, ensuring that the empire's coffers remained full while also funding his ambitious projects. It was a delicate dance on a financial tightrope, with the threat of bankruptcy always lurking in the shadows. Yet, perhaps the most enduring legacy of Khusro I was his ability to craft narratives. He was a master of spin, turning every victory, every achievement into a story that reinforced his image as a benevolent and wise ruler. Rock reliefs and inscriptions celebrated his accomplishments, depicting him as the ideal king, a philosopher, a warrior, and a builder. This wasn't just vanity, it was smart politics. By controlling the narrative, Khusro was able to strengthen his position and legitimize his rule in the eyes of his subjects and rivals alike. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of Khusro's reign. Beneath the gilded surface was an empire grappling with the relentless pressures of expansion and governance. The infrastructure projects, while impressive, were costly and required constant maintenance. The educational initiatives, though groundbreaking, had to contend with traditionalists who saw them as a threat to established norms. And the military campaigns, glorious as they were, left scars both physical and fiscal. In the end, Khusro's reign was a study in contrasts, a testament to the highs and lows of leadership. He was a king who dared to dream, to build, and to educate, yet he was also a pragmatist who understood the harsh realities of power. His era was one of both enlightenment and turmoil, a time when the Sasanian Empire reached for the stars even as it struggled under its own weight. As we draw this tale of Khusro to a close, remember that this is not the end, but merely a chapter in the ongoing saga of the Sasanian Empire. The challenges of maintaining an expansive realm, the pressures of internal dissent and external threats. These themes continue to echo through the corridors of history, setting the stage for the next act in this epic drama. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the intricate web of events that shaped the destiny of Persia's last great empire. As we transition from the glory days of Khusro, it's time to fast forward to the grand finale, the twilight of the Sasanian Empire. Picture yourself at a dramatic turning point, where the stage is set for a tale of decline that's less about destiny and more about a series of unfortunate events. The Sasanian Empire, once a dazzling beacon of Persian splendor, is about to face its toughest critics: time, circumstance, and a band of ambitious Arabs who didn't get the memo about Persia's invincibility. Now, before you start imagining this collapse as a Shakespearean tragedy with foreboding omens and inevitable doom, let's pump the brakes and look at it through a more realistic lens. The fall of the Sasanian Empire wasn't written in the stars. It was more like a comedy of errors, with a heavy dose of miscalculations and missed opportunities. The year is 651 AD, and the empire that once stretched its influence from the Euphrates to the Indus is about to face the ultimate test: Arab conquests that will forever change the course of Iranian history. First things first, let's debunk the myth of an empire destined to fall. Sure, the Sasanians had their share of internal strife, but who didn't? If internal dissent was a death sentence, there wouldn't be a civilization left standing. The Sasanian Empire was dealing with the usual suspects: nobility squabbles, religious tensions, and the odd famine thrown in for good measure. But destiny? Hardly. It was a confluence of factors that led to their downfall, not some cosmic inevitability. Economically, the Sasanian Empire was a bit like a once-thriving tech startup that missed the latest trend. The Silk Road, which had filled their coffers for centuries, was no longer the exclusive Persian ATM it once was. New trade routes were popping up, and the empire's control over the lucrative silk business was slipping through its fingers like sand. Couple this with heavy military expenses and the strain of maintaining a vast empire, and you've got a recipe for financial headaches that would make any accountant reach for the nearest abacus. Politically, things were just as tangled. The empire was dealing with a revolving door of rulers, some competent, others less so. After Khusro Roman II assassination in 628 AD, the throne became a game of musical chairs, with kings coming and going faster than you can say, dynastic instability. This lack of stable leadership was like giving the empire a sugar rush, followed by an inevitable crash. The political vacuum left the Sasanian military stretched thin, trying to put out fires on multiple fronts. Enter the Arabs, a coalition of tribes united under the banner of Islam, ready to seize the moment like a cat pouncing on a distracted mouse. The Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 AD was a turning point, a showdown that saw the Sasanian forces, led by General Rostam Farrukhzad, face off against a determined Arab army. Despite the romanticized tales of Rostam's valor, the battle ended in disaster for the Sasanians. A combination of heavy rainfall, poor tactical decisions, and perhaps a dash of bad luck led to a defeat that opened the floodgates for further Arab advances. Now, let's talk about the ultimate Sasanian misstep, their inability to adapt. In a world that was rapidly changing, the Sasanians clung to old ways, much like a vinyl collector in a digital world. Their administrative system, once a model of efficiency, was becoming outdated, and their reliance on the traditional nobility for military support was a double-edged sword. These nobles were more interested in preserving their own power than in defending the empire, a classic case of putting personal interests above the collective good. The final nail in the coffin came with the Battle of Nihawand in 642 AD, where the Sasanian forces were decisively defeated by the Arabs. Known as the Victory of Victories, this battle marked the beginning of the end for the Sasanian Empire. The Arabs swept through the Persian heartland with a momentum that was as unstoppable as it was unexpected. Yazdijerd Roman III, the last Sasanian king, found himself a king without a kingdom, on the run until his assassination in 651 AD, a tragic end to a once mighty dynasty. But let's not reduce this tale to a simple narrative of conquest. The Arab victories were not just about military might, they were also about ideological appeal. Islam offered a unifying force, a new social order that resonated with many who were disillusioned with the old Sasanian ways. The promise of a community based on faith and equality struck a chord in a region rife with social stratification and religious monopolies. Reflecting on the Sasanian legacy, it's clear that their story is woven into the very fabric of Iranian history. For nearly 4 centuries, they were a powerhouse of culture, innovation, and influence. Their architectural marvels, from the bridges of Khusro to the fire temples that dotted the landscape, left an indelible mark on the land. Their administrative systems and societal structures laid the groundwork for future empires, influencing governance long after their own demise. In the grand tapestry of history, the Sasanian Empire stands as a testament to both human achievement and folly, a reminder that even the mightiest can falter if they lose touch with the changing tides. Their legacy is not just in the ruins of palaces or the echoes of ancient battles, but in the enduring cultural and historical imprint they left behind. The Sasanians may have fallen, but their story continues to resonate, a complex narrative that challenges us to look beyond the surface and appreciate the intricate web of factors that shape the rise and fall of civilizations. So, as you drift off with visions of ancient Persia, remember that history is never as simple as it seems. It's a kaleidoscope of events, a dance of power and circumstance, where every step leaves a mark on the sands of time. The Sasanian Empire, with its grandeur and grit, invites us to ponder not just their past, but the lessons it holds for our future. As we close this chapter, let the echoes of their story remind us that history is a living dialogue between what was and what might yet be. If we could go back to the days of ancient China, you'd find land disputes that make modern real estate drama look like a backyard barbecue. Welcome to the Warring States period, a time when China was less a unified country and more like a fractious family reunion where everyone's brandishing swords. We're talking about a chaotic patchwork of 7 major states, each with its own ambitions, armies, and appetites for conquest. This was not your average game of Risk. It was real, bloody, and relentless. Now, why were these states so keen on building walls? Well, it's not because they were introverts who hated surprise visits. The main problem was those pesky nomadic tribes from the north, like the Xingnu. These guys were the original party crashers, swooping down on their horses and making off with cattle, crops, and an occasional village for good measure. In response, the states started constructing their own defensive walls, which were less about feng shui and more about desperately trying to keep their borders intact. Fast forward to the Qin dynasty, and we meet the man, the myth, the legend, Qin Shi Huang. In 221 BCE, he decided enough was enough with the whole state versus state drama. He unified China, becoming its first emperor, and embarked on a mission to make the Great Wall, well, great. But let's not romanticize it too much. This wasn't just about protecting his people from northern invaders. It was also a brilliant way to flex his newfound muscles and keep his subjects too busy to rebel. Qin Shi Huang wasn't playing around when it came to wall building. His vision was to stitch together the existing state walls into one massive, continuous structure. Ambitious, sure. Completely over the top, absolutely. This was ancient China's version of a national infrastructure project with a side of imperial propaganda. The wall wasn't just a barrier, it was a statement, a physical embodiment of unity, strength, and the emperor's absolute power. Now, let's talk about the labor force, which was a motley crew of soldiers, peasants, and prisoners. Basically, anyone who wasn't quick enough to dodge the draft. It's estimated that hundreds of thousands of people were conscripted to work on the wall. Imagine building something like the pyramids, but stretched out over thousands of kilometers. It's no wonder the Great Wall earned the grim nickname, the longest cemetery on Earth, as many workers perished under harsh conditions. In terms of construction techniques, forget modern machinery. They had manpower, and lots of it. Workers used rammed earth, stones, and wood, depending on the local resources. Rammed earth might sound like an eco-friendly building method, but it was back-breaking work. Layers of earth were pounded together using wooden frames and tools, a labor-intensive process that relied on sheer human sweat and determination. The political motivations for the wall were as much about keeping the emperor in power as they were about keeping invaders out. By employing such a massive workforce, Qin Shi Huang was essentially draining the pool of potential rebels. It was difficult to plot against the emperor when you were too exhausted from hauling stones all day. Plus, the wall served as a psychological barrier, a constant reminder of the emperor's reach and authority over every corner of his empire. And let's not forget the economic factor. Building the Great Wall wasn't cheap. It drained resources, both human and material, from the state. But for Qin Shi Huang, the cost was worth it as a long-term investment in stability, or at least the appearance of it. The wall was a testament to the power of centralized rule and the emperor's ability to mobilize the entire nation for his vision. So, while the idea of a wall that stretches across mountains and deserts might conjure images of grandeur, the reality was far grittier. The Great Wall was born out of chaos, ambition, and a hefty dose of imperial vanity. But hey, it sure beats a moat filled with alligators, right? As we continue to explore this colossal achievement, remember that behind every stone lies a story of survival, ambition, and the relentless drive to leave a mark that would endure through the ages. And as the dust settled from Qin Shi Huang's ambitious yet draconian reign, the Han dynasty swaggered onto the scene around 206 BCE, ready to turn the Great Wall project up a notch, or several. You know, because what better way to announce your dynasty's arrival than by tackling a colossal wall-building endeavor that would make even the most seasoned real estate developer sweat buckets. If the Qin dynasty laid the groundwork, the Han dynasty was all about the upgrades, treating the wall like a second-year renovation project that just never ends. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just about keeping out the marauding northern tribes, although that was certainly a perk. The Han emperors saw the wall as a multi-purpose tool, part defense, part propaganda, and part employment scheme. The triple threat of ancient infrastructure. First, let's talk logistics and economics, the nitty-gritty that would make your accountant break out in a cold sweat. The Han dynasty stretched the wall further than ever before, with estimates suggesting it grew to over 10,000 li, around 5,000 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's like building a wall from New York to Los Angeles, then deciding to tack on a little more just for fun. The volume of materials consumed was mind-boggling. They used everything from tamped earth to bricks, and even stone in some areas. This wasn't your typical brick-and-mortar operation. It was a full-on resource-devouring beast. And where did these materials come from? Local resources were key, but transporting them was no walk in the Imperial Park. Imagine hauling bricks up a mountain without a single forklift in sight. The sheer manpower required was staggering, with estimates suggesting that hundreds of thousands of laborers were conscripted. We're talking about an ancient workforce that would put modern construction crews to shame, minus the hard hats and union breaks. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the human cost. The romanticized tales of the wall's construction often gloss over the brutal reality. The Han dynasty wasn't shy about using forced labor, and let's just say they weren't handing out Employee of the Month awards. Many of those conscripted were prisoners or peasants who didn't exactly volunteer for this gig. The conditions were grueling, with harsh climates, difficult terrain, and a workload that would make Hercules throw in the towel. It's no wonder that the legend of the wall built on bones emerged. This wasn't just poetic license. It was closer to the truth than we'd like to admit. The economic toll was just as severe. The Han government poured resources into the wall like a gambler down on their luck, hoping for a big payoff. They funded the project through taxes, which, surprise, surprise, didn't make them the most popular guys in town. Picture a tax burden so heavy it could drive a farmer right out of his fields and into a labor camp at the wall. Not exactly the kind of legacy you'd want on your empire's resume, but the Han dynasty was playing the long game, betting on the wall's ability to secure trade routes and protect their burgeoning Silk Road enterprises. But here's the kicker. While we often picture the Great Wall as a stoic line in the sand against invaders, its true purpose was a bit more nuanced. The Han emperors were savvy politicians, and they understood that the wall was as much about internal control as it was about keeping outsiders at bay. By deploying vast numbers of troops along the wall, they maintained a steady presence that discouraged rebellion and kept the peace within China's borders. This was a dynasty that knew how to multitask, using the wall as a symbol of imperial might and a practical tool for maintaining their grip on power. Engineering techniques also saw some evolution during this time. The Han builders introduced watchtowers and signal stations, transforming the wall into a communication network that could relay messages faster than your average ancient courier. Smoke signals and lanterns became the emojis of their day, sending alerts across the vast expanse with surprising efficiency. This was ancient China's version of a high-speed internet connection, minus the bandwidth issues. So, while it's easy to get swept up in the romanticism of an ancient wonder stretching across the landscape, the reality was far more complex. The Han dynasty's contribution to the Great Wall was a blend of ambition and pragmatism, a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, but also a sobering reminder of the costs, both economic and human, that came with such grand designs. As we continue this journey through history, remember that the wall was never just about bricks and stone. It was about power, politics, and the unyielding desire to shape a legacy that would stand the test of time. And if the Han emperors had anything to say about it, that legacy would echo through the ages, long after the last brick was laid. As the echoes of the Han dynasty's ambitions faded into the annals of history, a new player emerged on the scene, the Ming dynasty. The Ming, ruling from 1368 to 1644, were like the ultimate home renovation experts, taking on the Great Wall with a zeal that would put any DIY enthusiast to shame. They didn't just leave the wall as a quaint relic of past glories. They transformed it into the icon we recognize today. Think of the Ming as the interior designers of the Great Wall, adding a little flourish here, a strategic enhancement there. Voila! A masterpiece of military architecture that would endure for centuries. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what the Ming dynasty actually did to the wall. They weren't just slapping on a fresh coat of paint and calling it a day. No, these guys were serious about defense. The Ming rebuilt and expanded the wall, stretching it to its most recognizable form, with estimates suggesting it spanned over 21,000 kilometers by the time they were done. That's like wrapping the equator with a stone ribbon. Not exactly a weekend project. But why go to all this trouble? For the Ming, the wall was more than just a physical barrier. It was a symbol of their resolve, a bold declaration that they would not be pushed around by pesky nomadic tribes like the Mongols, who had made a habit of crashing through China's northern front door. The wall was intended to be the ultimate deterrent. But here's the million-dollar question. If you build it, will they really stop coming? Spoiler alert, not always. The Ming's strategic innovations were as much about psychology as they were about stone and mortar. They introduced a series of watchtowers and beacon systems that would make even Paul Revere proud. Picture this, a network of signal fires and lanterns that could relay messages faster than a horse could gallop. It was like setting up an ancient Twitter feed, minus the trolls. These watchtowers weren't just for show. They were manned by soldiers ready to spring into action at the first sign of trouble. And let's not forget the economic angle. Reconstructing the wall wasn't exactly a bargain bin affair. The Ming dynasty poured vast sums of money into their fortifications, straining their coffers, but betting on long-term security. They funded the project through taxes and mandatory labor, which, unsurprisingly, didn't win them any popularity contests. It was like asking your neighbor to help you build a fence and then charging them for the privilege. So, was the wall effective? Well, yes and no. It did slow down invaders and made outright invasions more challenging, but it wasn't an impenetrable force field. Nomadic tribes, ever resourceful and persistent, often found ways around it or simply waited until the garrison had their guard down. The wall was a speed bump, not a roadblock, and the Mongols, in particular, were adept at navigating China's defenses. They didn't just march up to the wall and turn back. They strategized, regrouped, and sometimes even bribed their way through. Politically, the wall was a masterstroke of propaganda. It was a constant, looming reminder of the Ming dynasty's might and determination. But behind the towering stones was a more complex narrative, a tale of economic strain, political maneuvering, and the ceaseless push and pull between empire and invader. The wall was as much about projecting strength as it was about actual defense. It was like hanging a "Beware of Dog" sign on your fence when all you've got is a particularly feisty chihuahua. The Ming dynasty's focus on the wall also highlighted a broader strategy, the consolidation of power. By investing heavily in the wall, they kept their subjects busy and their military engaged. It was a grand unifying project that reinforced the idea of a strong, centralized state, but it also served as a reminder of the limits of physical barriers. While the wall was formidable, it couldn't stop internal strife or political intrigue, issues that would eventually contribute to the Ming's downfall. As we ponder the Great Wall's legacy, it's clear that its story is one of both grandeur and grit. The romantic image of a majestic barrier snaking across the landscape is tempered by the harsh realities of its construction and the relentless challenges it faced. The wall is a testament to human ingenuity and ambition, but also a reminder that no matter how high you build your walls, some things will always find a way through. So, as the Ming dynasty's chapter in the Great Wall saga draws to a close, we see a complex tapestry of triumphs and trials, where the stones tell stories of strength and struggle, unity and division. And with the stage set for the next act, we leave the wall standing tall, a silent witness to the ebb and flow of history, waiting for the next twist in its epic tale. It's fascinating how the Great Wall, once just a massive stone snake sprawling across China's rugged terrain, gradually morphed into a cultural icon, a symbol of endurance, and let's face it, a bit of a tourist magnet. But before we get too misty-eyed about its grandeur, let's strip away the romance and dig into the reality. Historically, the wall was more of a paper tiger than a fire-breathing dragon, and maintaining it was, well, less about heroism and more about patching up a leaky roof during a monsoon. For centuries, the wall stood as a testament to Chinese ingenuity and tenacity, but let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. The upkeep of this ancient behemoth was a logistical nightmare. Imagine trying to maintain a structure that stretches over 21,000 kilometers, about the distance from New York to Sydney and back. The wall required constant repairs, and every emperor who wanted to keep it standing had to pour resources into it like a bottomless money pit. Laborers were perpetually summoned to patch crumbling sections, replace weather-beaten stones, and ensure that the wall could at least manage a stoic facade in the face of nature's wrath. And while we're on the topic of nature, it had a habit of throwing a spanner in the works. Erosion, earthquakes, and the relentless march of time took their toll, turning once proud sections into architectural has-beens. The wall might have been a mighty dragon in the mythology books, but on the ground it often resembled a beleaguered old guard dog, trying its best to keep up appearances despite its creaky joints. Despite its shortcomings, the Great Wall's symbolic power grew over the centuries. In the collective imagination, it became less about defense and more about identity. The wall was a unifying emblem of national spirit, an architectural embodiment of Chinese resilience. But let's not gloss over the irony here. This symbol of unity was often built by a conscripted workforce of diverse ethnicities who had little choice in the matter. Their toil and sacrifice became the literal foundation of this national monument, a bittersweet reminder of the human cost behind the stone. As China modernized, the wall's reputation underwent another transformation. In the 20th century, it was embraced as a symbol of Chinese nationalism. The wall became a rallying cry for unity, a reminder of the nation's rich history and cultural heritage. It was featured prominently in propaganda, celebrated in literature, and immortalized in film. Yet, even as it was being romanticized, the wall was also becoming a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils of overreach and the limits of even the most grandiose undertakings. The Great Wall's transformation into a modern icon wasn't just about nationalism, it was also an exercise in branding. As China opened its doors to the world, the wall became a must-see destination for tourists. It was like the Mona Lisa of the East. Everyone wanted a snapshot with it, preferably without the hordes of fellow tourists in the background. But while visitors marveled at its ancient stones, they were often blissfully unaware of the wall's more complex narrative, a story of ambition, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of legacy. In modern times, the wall is often viewed through a dual lens. On one hand, it's celebrated as a marvel of human engineering and an enduring symbol of China's historical might. On the other, it's critiqued as a colossal folly, a reminder of the futility of trying to build a perfect defense against the chaos of the world. This duality is part of what makes the wall so fascinating. It's both a testament to human achievement and a monument to our hubris, a physical reminder that even the mightiest walls can't hold back the tides of time and change. The wall's legacy is as layered as its history. While it stands as a proud emblem of Chinese culture, it also serves as a sober reminder that no matter how grand our designs, the world has a way of humbling our best-laid plans. Today, the wall continues to inspire awe and wonder, drawing millions of visitors from across the globe. But for those willing to look beyond the postcard-perfect views, it offers a deeper lesson about the complexities of power, ambition, and the human spirit's quest to leave a mark on the world. As we ponder the wall's place in history, it's clear that its story is far from over. The Great Wall is a living monument, a testament to the interplay of myth and reality. It invites us to reflect on our own aspirations and the legacies we hope to leave behind. The wall may have started as a defense against invaders, but it has become so much more, a symbol of resilience, a cautionary tale, and a canvas upon which the story of a nation continues to unfold. And as we prepare to delve into the final chapters of this epic saga, we must remember that the wall, like history itself, is ever evolving, shaped by the hands of those who dare to dream beyond the horizon. As we prepare to unravel the final chapter of the Great Wall saga, it's worth reflecting on its monumental impact, both as a historical artifact and a gleaming beacon in the global imagination. The Great Wall has come a long way from its humble beginnings as a series of state-built barricades to becoming the world's most famous symbol of defense, albeit a symbol that often fell short of its lofty promises. It's like the world's most overhyped bouncer, impressive in stature, but not always effective at keeping the rowdy types at bay. Now, let's talk about the wall's legacy. In China, it's more than just an ancient relic. It's a testament to the nation's enduring spirit. The Great Wall is the kind of grand gesture that screams, "We're here to stay," louder than any national anthem could. It's a potent symbol of resilience and unity, a reminder that despite the odds, and there were many, the Chinese people stood firm, brick by back-breaking brick. But peel away the layers of myth, and you'll find a story of relentless human endeavor, economic strain, and the complex dance between ambition and reality. The wall's influence extends beyond China's borders, capturing the imaginations of people worldwide. It's become a cultural icon, a bucket list destination, and a backdrop for Instagram selfies that never quite capture its grandeur. Yet, this global fame has also come with challenges. The sheer volume of tourists, over 10 million annually, has put pressure on the wall, turning it into the historical equivalent of a worn-out celebrity. Foot traffic, pollution, and weathering add to the erosion, making preservation efforts a Herculean task. Enter the modern champions of the wall, conservationists. These folks are the unsung heroes, battling not only the elements, but also human interference. The Chinese government, alongside international organizations, has invested millions in restoration projects to stabilize the structure and prevent further decay. But the process is as delicate as it is daunting. It's a bit like trying to restore a centuries-old painting while it's still being touched by countless hands. You've got to maintain authenticity while ensuring it doesn't crumble away, a balancing act that's as tricky as it sounds. Despite these efforts, the wall faces another silent adversary, the march of progress. Urbanization has led to sections of the wall being dismantled or neglected, swallowed by sprawling cities and industrial expansion. It's a twist of irony that in a world hurtling toward the future, one of its oldest artifacts might be left behind, buried under concrete rather than celebrated in stone. But let's not get too downbeat. The wall has a knack for survival. Over 2 millennia of history have shown that no matter how many times the wall has been knocked down, it rises again, a testament to resilience and human tenacity. And while the physical structure may face challenges, its real strength lies in its symbolic power, a reminder that the mightiest fortifications are often not those built with stone, but with spirit. Now, let's turn to the metaphorical walls we build in our minds. The Great Wall, while an impressive feat of engineering, is also a symbol of the invisible barriers we construct, those boundaries of fear, prejudice, and misunderstanding. In a way, the story of the Great Wall is a story about the human condition, our eternal quest to protect what we hold dear, even when it means building barriers that might isolate us rather than shield us. The wall's history prompts us to question our own defenses. Are they safeguarding us, or are they merely keeping us from the richer, more interconnected world beyond? The Great Wall, despite its imposing presence, ultimately shows that physical barriers can only do so much. It's a lesson that echoes through time, a reminder that true security and unity come not from walls, but from the bridges we build. As we wrap up this epic tale, it's clear that the Great Wall is more than just an architectural wonder. It's a living narrative, an ongoing dialogue between the past and the present. Its stones whisper stories of sacrifice and ambition, while its continued existence challenges us to ponder the legacy we wish to create. The wall stands as a monument to human ingenuity and folly, a reminder that while we may strive to leave our mark on the world, in turn, leaves its mark on us. So the next time you find yourself gazing upon the Great Wall, whether in person or in the pages of history, let it inspire you to reflect on the boundaries in your own life. Consider the walls worth maintaining and those best left to crumble. Because in the end, the story of the Great Wall is not just about the stones that stretch across the horizon, but about the human spirit that dared to dream beyond them. And that, my friends, is a legacy worth contemplating. You're jolted awake by the sound of boots crunching on gravel and the distant rumble of artillery, your alarm clock in the chaotic symphony of war. Welcome to Normandy, 1944, where the air is thick with tension, and you, my friend, are a front-line medic. The beachheads are behind you, but the real work is just beginning. This isn't a Hollywood set. There's no director to yell, cut, when things get tough. It's raw, it's real, and it's your job to keep these guys in one piece. You roll out of your makeshift bunk, the damp morning air clinging to your fatigues like a second skin. The smell of mud, sweat, and diesel fuel, an aroma that says, welcome to the front lines, hits you. It's a morning routine far from the comforts of home, yet it's become your new normal. Coffee. If you're lucky, you might get a lukewarm cup of something that resembles it. Breakfast, a can of rations to fuel your day of patching up the brave, and sometimes the reckless. You might think being a medic in 1944 is all about heroics, but there's a gritty economic reality to it too. The supplies you clutch today are worth their weight in gold, or at least in morphine. Each syringe of morphine clocks in at around $2.15, and in today's cash, that's more like $33. It's a sobering reminder that every dose you administer is a costly lifeline. You're not just holding medicine, you're holding a piece of a massive logistical puzzle, one that's been assembled across oceans and continents. Speaking of logistics, you're one of about 10,000 medics deployed here. That's a small army dedicated not to taking lives, but to saving them. Each one of you is a cog in the vast war machine, tasked with the job of keeping as many soldiers in fighting shape as possible. You're the unsung heroes, the ones who don't carry guns, but still face the frontline dangers head-on. If you were hoping for a quiet morning, think again. The lull before the storm is deceptive, a calm wrapped in uncertainty. As you check your gear, you can't help but think about the sheer scale of this operation. The Allied forces have landed nearly 160,000 troops on D-Day alone. Now they're pushing inland, and every inch they gain comes at a cost. The war isn't just fought with bullets and bombs, but with bandages and blood transfusions. The morning air is thick with anticipation and the promise of another day where your skills will be put to the test. You might romanticize this as an adventure, a grand narrative of good versus evil, but the truth is more complex. Sure, the heroes are real, but so is the mess. The ground is littered with remnants of battles past, shell casings, scraps of uniforms, and yes, the occasional discarded canteen. It's a landscape of contradictions, where the beauty of the French countryside meets the brutal reality of warfare. It's a sobering reminder that while history may remember the victories, it often glosses over the grim details. The political and social stakes of this campaign are sky-high. The liberation of France isn't just a military objective. It's a symbol of hope, a statement that tyranny will not go unchallenged. But don't let the propaganda fool you. The path to victory is paved with sacrifice, and not just on the battlefield. Back home, factories are churning out supplies at breakneck speed. Women are stepping into roles they never imagined, and economies are stretched thin, all to support this monumental effort. As you sip your sorry excuse for coffee, you can't help but ponder the bigger picture. Each soldier you help today is a thread in the vast tapestry of history being woven right before your eyes. It's easy to get lost in the romanticism of it all, to buy into the myth of the gallant medic. But the reality is far less glamorous. It's about long hours, quick decisions, and doing your best with limited resources. It's about being the calm in the storm, a steady hand when everything else is chaos. The day is just beginning, and already the sound of engines firing up fills the air. Jeeps and ambulances are readied, each vehicle a lifeline to the men who will need you before the sun sets. You're preparing for the inevitable, those frantic moments where every second counts, where your actions could mean the difference between life and death. It's a job that doesn't allow for hesitation or second-guessing. So, as you lace up your boots and step into the fray, remember this. You're part of something much bigger than yourself. This is history in the making, and while your name might not be etched in the annals of time, your impact is undeniable. You're not just a medic. You're a guardian of humanity in its darkest hours, a beacon of hope amid the chaos of war. And as the day unfolds, you'll do what you do best, save lives, one soldier at a time. Now, as you lace up those boots and step into the fray, remember, you're about to dive into the chaos of a mid-morning frontline frenzy. It's like rush hour in a war zone, minus the honking cars, and with a lot more at stake than being late to the office. The battlefield orchestra is tuning up, and you are the composer of calm in this symphony of chaos. Picture yourself in the thick of it, dust and debris swirling like confetti at a parade no one wants to attend. Air is alive with the crack of gunfire and the distant thud of artillery. Your mission: keep the players on the field from becoming permanent spectators. Tanks roll past, a steel cacophony of war that underscores the urgency of your task. You're not just a cog in the machine, you're the oil that keeps it running, ensuring the human element doesn't seize up under pressure. Now, let's talk about those Hollywood myths, those cinematic flourishes that make war look like a heroic adventure. Sure, the movies love to show medics dashing through bullet-streaked air, heroically saving soldiers with a dramatic flourish. But the reality, far less glamorous. You're more likely to be shoulder-deep in mud, trying to patch up a guy who just realized that today's not his day. You've got to be nimble, dodging not just bullets, but also the infectious diseases that lurk like freeloading guests at a party. Hollywood never tells you about the trench foot or the dysentery, does it? And let's not forget the training that got you here. 8 to 12 weeks of intense preparation, where you learn not just to bandage wounds, but also to keep your cool when the heat is on. That iconic Red Cross armband you wear, it's supposed to be your shield, a symbol of neutrality protected by the Geneva Convention. In theory, it's a do-not-shoot pass, but in practice, it might as well be a bullseye. Geneva Convention or not, bullets don't discriminate. You're just as likely to catch one as the guy next to you, and that's the sobering truth they didn't highlight in training. Your gear is another story. Each item in your kit is a small miracle of wartime logistics. You've got bandages, sulfur powder, morphine syrettes, and a few other essentials crammed into a bag that feels like it holds the weight of the world. Remember the dollar, too. 15 syret of morphine. It's the difference between agony and relief, and in today's dollars, that's about $33 a pop, a high price for a fleeting moment of peace. Your backpack isn't just a collection of supplies. It's a mobile hospital, a lifeline in a canvas sack slung over your shoulder. The medic's role is often romanticized as heroic and noble, and while that's true, it's not the whole picture. You're not just a hero, you're a janitor of the battlefield, cleaning up after the mess of war. It's a grim reality, but one that reflects the duality of your role, both savior and servant to the chaos around you. You're stitching up the human cost of war, one soldier at a time, and you do it with a resilience that defies the romanticized narratives. And speaking of narratives, you're part of a bigger story, one where the stakes are nothing short of world-altering. The liberation of France is a grand saga, the the stuff of history books, but it's also a logistical nightmare. The Allied forces are a coalition of nations, each with its own agenda and priorities. Soldiers from the U.S., Britain, Canada, and other nations fight shoulder to shoulder, and it's your job to keep them in the game. The political stakes are sky high, and every life you save is a victory against tyranny. But let's not forget the economic context. War isn't just fought on the battlefield, it's waged in factories and on farms. Back home, economies are stretched thin to support the war effort, and every bandage you use is a testament to the sacrifices made by countless others. It's a complex web of supply chains and production lines, each one a vital artery in the body of the war machine. You're not just using supplies, you're embodying the collective effort of nations. Yet here you are, in the thick of it, a beacon of hope amid the devastation. Your actions speak louder than any propaganda poster, louder than the booming rhetoric of leaders far from the front lines. You're the real deal, the unsung hero in a story that often glosses over the gritty details. And as the day unfolds and the chaos crescendos, you'll keep doing what you do best, saving lives, one soldier at a time. The afternoon sun hangs high, casting long shadows that are as much a part of the battlefield as the soldiers themselves. You're knee-deep in the chaos of triage, a word that sounds almost clinical until you're living it. Here's where the rubber meets the road, where the abstract idea of battlefield medicine becomes a brutal reality. You're not just making medical decisions, you're making moral ones. There's no textbook for this, no handy guide on how to decide who gets your attention first when everyone needs it yesterday. Triage is like playing guard with a medical kit and a stopwatch. You've got seconds to assess a soldier's injuries, seconds to figure out if they're likely to make it, and even fewer seconds to move on to the next. It's a heart-wrenching calculus, immediate, delayed, or expectant. The expectant cases, the ones who probably won't make it, are the hardest. It's a grim reality that goes against every instinct you have as a medic. But practicality trumps sentimentality here. You've got to keep as many in the fight as possible. A harsh truth that doesn't make for a great war movie montage. Speaking of movies, let's talk about those cinematic narratives. The silver screen loves to paint war with broad strokes of heroism and sacrifice, but the reality on the ground is more nuanced. Sure, there's heroism, but it often looks less like charging into battle and more like holding a soldier's hand as you apply pressure to a wound, reassuring them that they're going to be okay, even if you're not quite sure they will be. The movies won't tell you about the smell, the noise, the constant churn of adrenaline and fear. They won't show the aftermath, the empty eyes of a soldier who's just lost a friend. But you see it all, and it's your job to shoulder it. Let's pivot to the bigger picture for a moment, the political and social dynamics that underpin this colossal endeavor. Wartime propaganda is a fascinating beast, a blend of truth and fiction designed to keep morale high and the war effort rolling. Back home, images of medics are plastered on posters, the clean-cut saviors of the wounded, a comforting lie amid the chaos. The reality, you're exhausted, covered in mud, and questioning your own limits with each passing hour. You're a symbol of hope, sure, but not in the sanitized way the posters suggest. And then there's the role of medics in maintaining morale, a job that goes beyond bandages and morphine. You're a confidant, a psychologist without a couch, helping soldiers grapple with the mental toll of war. It's not just about keeping bodies intact, it's about holding the line against despair. You're the unofficial emotional support, the one who listens to stories of home, the one who tries to conjure a smile from the depths of exhaustion. And sometimes, just sometimes, you succeed. Now, let's talk numbers, because war isn't just about bullets and bravery, it's about resources. Each soldier you stabilize is a testament to the vast logistics network that keeps this operation afloat. The US alone spent about $341 billion on World War II, a staggering figure that translates to over $5 trillion today. Every bandage, every dose of penicillin is a product of this economic behemoth. You're not just fighting with medical supplies. You're wielding the collective effort of millions back home. Each decision you make is tied to a complex web of supply lines and production schedules, a dance of economics and human necessity. And let's not forget the cultural dynamics at play. The Allied forces are a patchwork of nations, each bringing their own traditions, languages, and expectations to the table. You're treating soldiers from the U.S., Britain, Canada, and beyond all brought together by a common cause, but divided by different backgrounds. It's a melting pot of accents and attitudes, a reminder that this is a global conflict with global stakes. You're not just a medic, you're an ambassador of sorts, bridging the gaps between cultures with a steady hand and a reassuring smile. As the afternoon wears on, the myths of heroism and glory start to crumble under the weight of reality. You're not just dealing with injuries, you're confronting the raw, unfiltered truth of war. It's not pretty and it's not the stuff of legend. It's gritty, it's grim, and it's deeply human. But in that mess, there's an undeniable beauty, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the courage that emerges in the darkest of times. Yet, despite the exhaustion, despite the heartbreak, you keep going. Because in the end, this isn't about you. It's about the soldiers you save, the lives you touch, the small victories that add up to something much larger. And as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting its last warm glow over the battlefield, you know that you'll be back at it tomorrow. The war doesn't wait, and neither do you. This is history in the making, and you're right in the thick of it, where every decision counts, and every life matters. So, as the shadows lengthen and the night begins to claim the day, take a moment to breathe. You've earned it. You're part of something monumental, a living, breathing piece of history that will echo through time. And while the world may never know your name, your impact is as real and tangible as the ground beneath your feet. You're not just a medic. You're a custodian of courage, a guardian of hope in a world turned upside down. And that, my friend, is a legacy worth fighting for. As the dusk of the day begins to settle in, you find yourself knee-deep in the gritty, relentless reality of war's innovation. Here's the thing. Battlefield medicine in 1944 isn't just about slapping on bandages and hoping for the best. It's about rolling up your sleeves and getting inventive with what little you've got. Your kit might as well be a magician's hat, because you're pulling out tricks left and right just to keep your patients alive. Let's talk sulfur powder. Sounds like something you'd sprinkle on a sandwich, but in the gritty world of wartime medicine, this stuff is gold dust. Discovered in the 1930s, sulfur drugs were the FBI's most wanted in the fight against infection on the battlefield. They had the power to reduce mortality rates from wound infections by a staggering 30%. You're tossing this miracle powder onto wounds like confetti at a parade, each sprinkle a small act of defiance against the microscopic foes that could turn a scrape into a death sentence. But here's the kicker. Sulfur powder isn't just a wonder drug. It's the result of a desperate need for innovation in the face of overwhelming odds. With penicillin still in its infancy and not widely available, this powder became the frontline defense against infection. Medics like you became improvisational geniuses, using everything from sulfur to cigarette paper as makeshift dressings when supplies ran thin. If you ever thought Mac Jiver was impressive, wait until you meet a WWII medic. The need for such improvisation was driven by harsh economic and logistical realities. The US was cranking out war supplies like there was no tomorrow, because for many, there wasn't. Factories ran 24/7, and the logistics of getting those supplies from the assembly line to the front lines was a Herculean task. It's a game of resource Tetris, fitting together pieces from all over the globe to keep the war machine chugging along. Now, let's flip the script a bit and look at the cultural impact of these battlefield innovations. Post-war, the stories of medics and their ingenuity became the stuff of legend. They were spun into tales of near-mythical proportions, the plucky medic with a heart of gold and a head full of clever tricks. It's the kind of narrative that makes for great movies and bedtime stories, but the reality, far less glamorous. The truth is that these innovations were born out of sheer necessity, a desperate scramble to do whatever it took to save lives. And then there's the post-war narrative. In the years following the end of WWII, the stories of medics and their battlefield innovations were wrapped up in a neat package of heroism and ingenuity. The public loved the image of the quick-thinking medic who could turn a tin can into a tourniquet. It was a comforting story, a balm for a world still reeling from the horrors of war. But scratch the surface, and you'll find a harsher reality, a story of relentless pressure, split-second decisions, and the constant battle against not just enemy forces, but time and dwindling supplies. Speaking of time, let's talk about how fleeting it feels when you're in the thick of it. Late afternoon could easily be mistaken for midnight. given how much has happened since the sun was at its peak. You might not be dodging bullets at the moment, but you're still in the trenches, fighting a different kind of war, a war against infection, blood loss, and the relentless march of fatigue. Every medic in Normandy knows that a minute saved can be a life saved. This isn't just a pithy saying, it's the core of your reality. You've got to be quicker than a caffeinated squirrel in a nut factory, assessing situations and making calls that could mean the difference between life and death. You're not just a medic, you're a maestro of triage, orchestrating a symphony of survival in a cacophony of chaos. And while we're on the subject of chaos, let's not forget the political and social backdrop that's shaping all of this. The liberation of Europe wasn't just a military goal, it was a political statement, a clarion call for freedom and a stand against tyranny. Each soldier saved, each innovation made, was a step closer to that monumental goal. It was a patchwork quilt of nations and cultures, stitched together by a common enemy and a shared vision of a future free from oppression. Now, zoom out for a second and consider the economic tapestry that underpins this colossal effort. The war effort wasn't just fought with guns and tanks. It was sustained by the sweat and toil of countless workers back home. Every bandage you use, every sulfur packet you sprinkle, is a testament to the millions of hands that shape them. The U.S. alone spent billions, $341 billion to be exact, on the war. That's over $5 trillion in today's money, a staggering sum that funded everything from food to firepower, ensuring that every cog in the war machine, including you, kept turning. In the grand scheme of things, your role might seem small, but it's crucial. You're not just applying first aid, you're reinforcing the very fabric of the Allied effort. Each life saved is another thread in the tapestry of victory, and each innovation is a testament to human ingenuity in the face of adversity. You're a part of a story that's greater than any one person, a story of resilience, adaptation, and the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to give up. As the sun dips lower, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, you realize that the stories that will be told of this day will be as varied as the people who lived it. Some will speak of heroics and triumphs, while others will remember the gritty realities and heart-trenching decisions. Both are true, and both are necessary, because history isn't just a collection of facts. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives, each one adding its own unique color and texture. In the end, you're not just a medic. You're a custodian of memories, a guardian of stories that will echo through time. You're part of something monumental, and while the world may never know your name, your impact is as real and tangible as the ground beneath your feet. This is history in the making. As the shadows lengthen and the night begins to claim the day, you know that tomorrow will bring new challenges, new innovations, and new stories to tell. So take a moment to breathe, to reflect on the day that's been, and to prepare for the day to come. You're part of a legacy that's as much about the human spirit as it is about military might, a legacy that will endure long after the last shot has been fired and the war is a distant memory. This is your story, and it's one worth telling. As you stand there, taking in the last hues of the setting sun, it's hard not to get a little introspective. The day has been a whirlwind, a chaotic dance of saving lives and confronting the raw realities of war. But in the stillness of this moment, let's reflect on what it all means, not just for you, but for the hundreds of thousands who've been touched by the work of medics in Normandy. First, consider the sheer scale of human suffering and resilience you've been a part of. Over 400,000 soldiers were wounded in Normandy alone. That's not just a number. It's a staggering testament to the brutality and tenacity of this conflict. Yet, thanks to medics like you, the survival rate soared. You're the thin line between life and oblivion, a role that might not come with a cape, but deserves one nonetheless. Let's put this into perspective. Before the war, the chances of surviving a battlefield injury were pretty grim. In Normandy, thanks to medical advancements and the tireless efforts of medics, about 90% of the wounded survived. That's not just a statistic, it's a revolution in battlefield medicine. Those numbers aren't just proof of skill, they're evidence of a seismic shift in how wars were fought and lives were saved. Now, let's talk about the legacy of these medics. They weren't just patching up soldiers, they were laying the groundwork for modern emergency medicine. Just think, the techniques honed under fire, quick triage, rapid evacuation, and innovative treatments are the very strategies that shape today's trauma care. When you call 911, and a paramedic arrives with a kit that looks suspiciously like yours, you're seeing the echo of those Normandy fields. But numbers and statistics only tell part of the story. The real heart of this legacy lies in the personal stories of the medics themselves. Take Corporal Lawrence Allen, for example. His letters home speak of the relentless pressure, the heartbreak of losing patients, and the joy of seeing wounded men return to the fight. "You don't think about being a hero," he wrote. "You just think about getting through the day and hoping your hands do more good than harm." It's a humble sentiment, but one that captures the essence of what it means to be a medic on the front lines. Another story that stands out is that of Sergeant Eugene Rowe, a medic with the 101st Airborne Division. His experiences in Normandy were immortalized in the book and subsequent miniseries, Band of Brothers. But the dramatization doesn't quite capture the quiet courage he displayed. Rowe's own words, recounted in his letters, reveal a man who saw the worst of humanity, yet never lost his compassion. "In the midst of hell," he wrote, "you find little pieces of heaven in the smiles of the men whose lives you save." These stories aren't just footnotes in history. They are the human face of war's brutal arithmetic. They remind us that while the big picture is painted with broad strokes, it's the small, personal moments that give it depth and meaning. The medic's legacy isn't just in the lives they saved, but in the compassion they showed and the innovations they drove forward under unimaginable pressure. Let's not forget the broader impact of these efforts. Work you and your fellow medics did wasn't just about saving soldiers. It was about upholding the moral fabric of the war effort. In a conflict where the lines between good and evil could blur, medics were the embodiment of humanity's better angels, risking their lives not to take others, but to save them. And here's the kicker. Despite their monumental contributions, medics often remain the unsung heroes of WWII. Hollywood might love a good shoot 'em up, but the quiet dignity of a medic patching up a wounded comrade doesn't make for blockbuster material. Yet, in many ways, it's the medics who are the true exemplars of courage. After all, it takes a special kind of bravery to face the horrors of war armed with nothing more than a medical kit and a determination to do no harm. As the night deepens, it's worth considering what all this means for the world today. The legacy of WW2 medics isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a living, breathing influence on how we approach medicine and humanitarian efforts in our current age. Their innovations have trickled down through the decades, shaping everything from battlefield protocols to civilian emergency response systems. The next time you see an ambulance racing down the street, remember that its roots trace back to the muddy fields of Normandy, where medics like you redefined what was possible under fire. So, as you wrap up this long, arduous day, take solace in knowing that you've played a part in a story that's far bigger than any one person. You're not just a cog in the machine. You're a vital thread in the tapestry of history. Your work has left an indelible mark on the world, a legacy of hope, resilience, and the power of the human spirit to rise above even the darkest of times. And as you finally settle down for the night, with the echoes of the day's chaos still ringing in your ears, know this: you've earned the right to rest, to reflect, and to take pride in what you've accomplished. You've been a guardian of the fallen, a savior to the wounded, and a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needed it. You've not just survived another day, you've contributed to a legacy that will endure long after the last echoes of war have faded into history. This is your moment to rest, recharge, and ready yourself for whatever tomorrow brings. Because in the end, you're part of a legacy that transcends the battlefield, a legacy that speaks to the best of what humanity can achieve when we choose compassion over conflict, healing over harm. And that, dear friend, is a story worth celebrating, remembering, and carrying forward with every step you take.